Hi, welcome to the VonDubCast. If you'd like to skip directly to the interview, just skip right to about 4 minutes. All right, welcome everybody. Episode number 28. This is an episode I've been really excited to release. I had found these guys just kind of on a whim when I saw an article on LinkedIn about these two University of Alberta students that had written an open letter to Justin Trudeau, balancing the environment and the energy sector, and it really spoke to me. It was some things that I had really felt passionately about, and they were, really out there making a difference with it. So I thought, hey, why not reach out, see if I could have them on the podcast? I think this is something I could expand on and help spread their message. So we eventually made it happen, and had to record it over two separate occasions just for time restrictions and stuff. So at one point in the podcast, you'll hear us say we're going to a bathroom break, and then we ended up having to wait another week and then regroup in on the following weekend and recording the second half of the podcast. So just if you notice any volume differences, I happen to be in a different room. I was in a different location for both recordings. So if you notice it being a little bit off, apologies, but that's just how you have to make it happen to bring things full circle. So yeah, it was really fun podcast. This is one of the ones that are one of those subjects that I feel really strongly about. It's been so close to my heart and so close to people's hearts, with just kind of how the oil and gas industry and energy industry as a whole is viewed. And when you grow up in a town like Slave Lake that is so dependent on it, and you see the good people that are involved in these industries, and it's not what the media paints it out to be, it sure hits a sore spot when you feel like it's being demonized all over the place. So yeah, it was lots of fun to record with these two. I think they're going to be doing some cool things in the future, and I'm excited to catch up with them again later on. Like I'd been mentioned on the last podcast, trying to work my way into some sponsorships. So if you know anybody that you think would be a good fit, maybe it's a business out of either online, out of Slave Lake, Edmonton, or Calgary or Grand Prairie are probably the main areas, or I mean, even better, a mix of those three or four. That'd be awesome. I'm interested. All levels could be $20 to unlimited, so it doesn't need to be big or small. And I'm pretty creative when it comes to how we do it. So if you don't want to reach out and just see if there's any way that your business could fit in with the VonDubCast, if you think this is a platform that's connecting with people, if it's connected with you, it's probably connected with other people. And if you think I can send people your way, let me know. And also, like I had said last week on the podcast, I have an idea. I would like to do a solo podcast just with somebody, recurring someone, and I'd like to try out a few different people in it, just with some current events and tossing some things back and forth. So kind of gave a breakdown on the last podcast. If you want a more detailed outlook on what that would look like, you can go to the last podcast, number 27, and listen to the intro to that. I kind of give a more detailed breakdown, or just reach out to me on, if you have my number, you can reach out to me, or on the VonDubCast Instagram is probably the best way. And speaking of that, if you could give me a follow on Instagram and Twitter pages for the VonDubCast, it really helps me grow this podcast. Like I say every week, really trying to use that to show people that people are listening to this podcast, and allows me just to get bigger guests on. Since this is more of a serious subject and less silly, and maybe I'll keep this intro nice and short, just to the point of the things I need you to do. But more important than all that stuff, if you could, if it does resonate with you, please pass it on to a friend. Word of mouth is how podcasts spread. And this is the only thing I ask you guys. I mean, I try to make this podcast as entertaining as possible, so it's worth it for you guys. And in return, if you guys could just try and help me grow it, that'd be a huge help to me. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you guys have as much fun listening as I did recording it. And see you after the episode. All right, welcome everybody to episode 28 of the VonDubCast. My guests today are Skye and Daniel, and thank you guys so much for being here.
Thanks for having us, Nick.
Yeah,
We're
thank
super
you.
Excited.
Awesome. So you guys have done some really cool things, and I think when I started reading the article where I found you guys, it was almost like reading my own words put out there. It was all the things I've been thinking for a long time and really was frustrated with and wanted to put out there. And then when I found that you guys actually put that to paper and penned a letter to Justin Trudeau, I was really blown away just with the the fortitude the chutzpah to actually take it in and not just talk about it like I did for so many years. And I'm sure we'll get all into that. But even kind of before we got there, I kind of wanted to just ask you guys how you got into geology, because you guys are both master's geology students at the U of A, and just where that sparked in your childhood, or when you decided you want to be that, and then kind of how you got to this point before we get into the nitty gritty of the letter and everything.
Nice. I'll go first on that one.
Awesome.
I got into geology pretty much for the passion of it. And when I was a kid in scouts, and Skye can talk to this too, that we're just both rock heads.
Yeah.
And like we love just going outdoors, picking up rocks, rock collecting, and then trying to find the shiniest one.
Yeah.
And and just it started from there. And my dad was an engineer, but I didn't really like the work that he was doing. I just didn't have a drive to do it.
Right.
So then going through my high school career, I was just thinking, well, what am I going to do? And like, how can I find a career that I'm passionate about? And then it just hit me that it's just like geology.
Yeah.
And just started running with it, and it's super fun. So I did my undergrad at the U of A, and then went back for my master's degree just to help solidify my knowledge as a geologist.
Yeah. And through that whole time, what was your understanding of kind of the oil field industry and the energy resource industry before you kind of got into school and university? What kind of preconceived notions did you have, and what was kind of your mindset around it beforehand?
So I was proud and am proud of the oil and gas industry here in Canada, because I'm Alberta and Calgary born and raised, and my grandfather was selling energy equipment. And then my dad's in the oil patch, and he used to be a rig pig. Yeah. So he was out slinging pipe, and it just sounded like I kind of wanted to do that, because that sounded like a really cool job to be out in the middle of nowhere. And then he's like, yeah, you don't want to do that. It's really hard work. I was like, okay.
I hear you.
But yeah, I had a passion for the oil and gas industry, and just understanding that it's not just oil and gas, it was energy.
Right.
And it was a necessity for our livelihood. And I wanted to continue that path and go into either mining or oil and gas with my geology career.
For sure.
Yeah.
And Skye, kind of same question to you.
Yeah. So just growing up, like Daniel, like I was just out in the mountains. We did a lot of backpacking through the mountains, and I just remember there's a certain mountains and stuff where you see the huge folds and everything of the rocks just bending. Yeah. Right in the mountain. I was just like kind of blown away at it, and just learning, like just seeing those things and just being outside and like having an appreciative for like the environment and being in the nature and everything. Yeah. And then got into geology, and then learned about geology. I really didn't know about geology until like I was kind of exploring my options when I was just kind of doing generals. And then all of a sudden I heard about that. I was like, wait, that's actually a job. And then it's like, sign me up. And right there and then I got into the geology program at the U of A, doing my undergrad in geology. And then right after that, I got into my master's. And in my last year of geology, I just kind of knew, like, I loved just learning about the rocks. It's just problem solving, just the nature of constantly learning about new things, and just trying to understand what's below our feet with limited data. Like we have all these boreholes through the whole ground, and then you only have a column of rock that's only 4 inches wide. And then it's like, all right, here you go. Try to figure out what's going on over this huge area. Right. And then it's just using your imagination and just trying to picture of what the environment that we see in today's environment. Like we see all the different rivers, we see all the different beaches and different dynamic systems, and trying to relate that to the subsurface. And like it's exciting to me. And I then got into my master's, where I wanted to get into a bit of geostatistics, so a bit more heavier math based, which isn't so typical for a geo to say that, but it's fun. It's exciting. It's there's always something new about it. So it's just the lifelong learning aspect of geology, as well as just being outside and having those opportunities to do field work and then relating it to subsurface. It's fun.
I've never heard rocks described so eloquently. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And then Skye, what about you? What were your views on kind of the oil and gas industry before you got so involved in it through geology?
Yeah, and so that's like I've had uncles who worked within the industry, and like I've heard things, and like even before like my first internship with a junior company, I had just your stereotypes. Like I thought, like I didn't realize until I started working for them, like the amount of environmental, like the things that they do for environmental protection, and like that they just don't want to just drill holes in the ground just for anything. That they do all these environmental risk assessments. They do, they look at everything before they go to it. And like with the regulations with AER, like they're pretty tight, and it is really displayed among the people you work with. And so it's quite the contrast from where I was at before. I was kind of like, okay, like we hear all these things in like the media and like we like surrounding it, but once you get in it, it's like, wow, like they really do care, and they're really trying their best to like innovate. Like they don't just stick where they're at, they're looking constantly for solutions. And it's quite the contrast between what we see in the media and versus now. And so that's my experience. Like I was kind of like neutral ground, and then as soon as I got into it, it's like, wow, like they're there. It's like, for example, like it's like the most electric vehicles I've seen are in some of the downtown parkades there in Calgary, so more than I've seen here in Edmonton. And that's just something that like I noticed. I was like, holy smokes, there's all these electric vehicles, and like you can see like with the passion with people, like quite a few people go to work at these companies, and they also go to the mountains on the weekends. And like part of one thing I've always grown up is leave no trace, when you go camping. So it's something that definitely see like with the people there.
Yeah, for sure. And that's exactly what I related to so strongly when I first read the article and then read the letter itself. A big piece of it, and stop me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words into your guys' mouth, but a big piece of it was kind of the understanding that you can see both sides of it. And there's kind of the one group that thinks that environment is completely secondary, drill, climate change isn't real. And then there's the other side of it that thinks the industry is, they've completely demonized the industry. Anything that touches it is bad. They don't care about the environment. And like you say, once you get a little deeper into it, you can see kind of both sides of it. And for myself, growing up in Slave Lake, Alberta, I was definitely on the one side of the spectrum. I grew up kind of hearing that everybody drill, climate change isn't real. And I kind of came up with that. And, it never really rung completely true with me because I had done my own research, and I was always a bit more to the middle of that kind of pack. But just with everyone around you, that's kind of the mindset you take in. And it definitely was something that I knew I had within me. And then when I went to school, my business degree, the major was natural resources, energy and environment. And it was heavy on the environment. And what I found was all the classes I took, if I went and I tried to give a nuanced point of view, like you guys are trying to say, and like you guys kind of laid out nicely in your letter, I would get failing grades.
Yeah.
They wouldn't put it through. And it drove me nuts because I didn't want to sacrifice who I was. I wanted to give like the industry is good and environment is good, and you need to work both together. But if it wasn't completely to the one side of all environment, I was failing these courses. So then it got to the point where for my whole degree, I had to really change who I was on the outside to just put myself in the shoes of somebody in that camp and write papers and do tests from that mindset. And it started getting me through and started me passing these courses, but it was really tough for me. But what it allowed me to do was kind of put my feet into their shoes and see how they're seeing the industry. And it gave me kind of it balanced out that way I was raised up with, of that drill, fuck climate change, fuck the environment. Let's do this, right? That was very much the Slave Lake kind of way in a lot of senses. And there's a lot of people that had a lot more balanced view, especially like you say, once you dig a little bit deeper. But then then leaving, so now I had kind of the two sides of it. I'd really seen both camps firsthand and had seen their arguments. And a lot of the times the arguments that are put out in the media aren't the real arguments of the people on the ground.
No. Yeah, exactly.
And then when I went into industry and I saw the exact same thing you did of, oh, these people aren't like the things I grew up with. That's not the way people are actually acting out in the field. They do care. They are putting these things in place. They are following the regulations. They're doing these hazard assessments. And I was blown away, but I felt like nobody was carrying that torch. Nobody was ringing that bell. And I was really frustrated with it. So when I just stumbled upon on LinkedIn that article with you guys, I was like, holy shit, somebody's saying what I've been feeling this whole time. And it was really cool. So just, how did you guys get to that point? Was it kind of a slow burn and something happened that you guys just realized we have to make a change and we need to write this letter? Or was it something you guys had planned for a long time? Just kind of take me through the letter itself, how you guys wrote it, and maybe some of the background you had to do to make it happen.
So I'll jump on this one right now. I had the exact same. What your story rings a lot with a lot of university students, I believe.
Yeah.
That there's we're part of the research group at the University of Alberta, and we all work on sedimentology and understand and want to get into industry or academia regarding possibly oil energy.
Yeah.
And Skye and I have been chatting for a while, just about, because we share an office space. We've been chatting for a while and just be like, oh my goodness, like, why is the media doing this?
Yeah.
Can't someone do something about it? And so it was a slow burn for a while. And then a letter came out from the University of Alberta asking Trudeau not to support oil and gas within COVID times, like during the COVID pandemic. And that just kind of sparked, we're like, okay, that's it. If this is coming from the University of Alberta, we don't have these views. We are associated with this industry. We are associated with the University of Alberta. We want to have finally a neutral ground and optimistic approach, because you can't argue one without the other. That's where our research went when we started researching of like, okay, well, how did they write their letter? What facts did they put in? We fact checked that, found our own facts, and just said, hey, you can't have a neutral view. And that process was just, and we've only been getting good reviews from the letter. Like, and I'll let Skye talk about that a bit more, but it's
and just to clarify, it was two professors from the U of A, not the U of A itself.
Right.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah. So just to make that clear. And so literally Dan and I like looked at each other and it was like, we need to write something. We need to do something, because it's just like in the media, they portray that all academics or all researchers are against, energy development, responsible energy development. And like everyone has different views of what energy is. And it's having that inclusive, balanced atmosphere. And so, we wrote a letter and just regarding some of the things that we see, and just really have it fact driven. Just laying it down. This is where we see things. And then we compiled not just like one poll that we randomly found about support, for the industry. We like compiled, I'd have to relook at it, well over.
Bring it up,
What was it? Like, we got about over like nine
polls. We have Abacus data
from.
We have
8-9 polls,
22 different papers or YouTube articles, and on the figure we have 9 separate polls that we wanted to make sure, because it was pretty nerve-wracking being like, okay, we need to do something. Okay, we need to make sure we do it right, and just make sure that it's not a joke. It's not two students putting out a letter saying we support both. It's more like, okay, no, we support both with fact-driven arguments.
And like with these stats, it shows that a majority of Canadians, like a consensus, support this responsible development, and
Right.
that's important. So
Which you would never think, with how the media portrays it, you would never think there'd be that much of a consensus on it. And that's the biggest piece to me, is it seems like what's being portrayed in the media really spins people's views on, and people that are maybe in the middle and don't really care either way, they get pulled to the one side because everything's portrayed as, oh, everybody's on board for this is bad. Okay, I'm going to jump onto this team. This is bad, without actually doing any research. But when in reality, when you actually look at where people support, it's a lot more nuanced. It's a lot more in the middle. And I think people's deep down feelings a lot more aligned with kind of how you laid it out in the letter, where you need both. You need environmental controls, but you need energy, and we need to find sustainable ways and new technology. And I think one of the things that you had said, Dan, was it, and this is something that I found very much true, is the best places where new technology and new ideas come from is when it's industry led, with environment at the forefront. And that is where these things, a lot of the government policy and stuff does not really bring forward positive change. It impacts and it looks for workarounds, but when industry gets into it, right, and tries to, like, whether it's carbon capture, or whether it's finding safer ways to do fracking, it really pushes forward, and it really is where you see the big leaps. But you demonize the industry so much, and
you can't make those leaps.
Yeah, and even when those leaps are made, they're either not covered, you don't hear about
them,
or belittled. Exactly. And what is that sending a message to for these companies that are trying to move forward and trying to, get on board with what everybody's saying is the way forward? It makes it really difficult, right? That's what I see, and I just wonder if you guys see the same thing.
And I'm going to add to that too, that when industry starts to advocate for themselves, they're saying, "Oh, these people are lying to you. This isn't how it's going," and it's just literally industry just saying, like, "Oh my goodness, there's no winning." So I think that's where Skye and I have the unique opportunity as students, and with the programmers, the volunteer group we're associated with, Students for Canada, that we are students and we are trying to support a neutral ground, and change the conversation around just resources in general, because they are needed, and technology is advancing to a point that, like, so an example, some oil and gas companies, they should be referred to as energy companies, but some energy companies are committing to net zero by 2050. And that's not being really publicized, or I haven't been seeing that. And some other companies are saying by 2030 they're going to reduce their emissions by 30%.
Wow.
And there's actually strives to become better and to reduce CO2 emissions and the impact they have on the environment. But it's just, with the bickering that's going on, it's like how you said, it's very hard to
make that heard.
Keep moving. Yeah,
for sure. And I think one thing that I picked up on you saying there was these oil and gas companies that should be referred to as energy companies. I think language plays a huge role in this, and how the language is laid out, tar sands versus oil sands, versus all those kind of things. And a lot of that, is that something that you guys focused on when you were doing your research and writing up the letter?
I'll let you take this one.
Oh yeah. That's something that, like, plays a huge role within our letter, and one of our portions of it talks about that. And there's a prof that at the U of A just talked about the polarization of words and how destructive it can be on both sides of the spectrum.
For sure.
And it's not productive. It doesn't really get you anywhere when you're using this contrasting, polarizing language. Referring to these things. And
because the way I see it is so much of it, what words should be is conveying intent. But when you pick and choose words that you're trying to make people feel a certain way, instead of just feeling the pure facts of it, it takes away and it really poisons the well a lot of the time. And I think you nailed it on the head, where it comes from both sides. Industry does it a lot of the time. Some of the harshest things they do, they try to put nicer names on so it doesn't seem so bad. And then on the same side, the media is putting, these things of even really responsibly thought out projects, they demonize them with just this language that they're really harming the environment, and it makes it really convoluted. It makes it hard for people to do their own research and to find out for themselves what if their project is good or bad, because it's so tainted by the language just used surrounding it, right?
and energy literacy that we're finding out too,
Yes.
because we talked to a gentleman that presented at Geo Convention, and he had a very neutrally driven argument and was stating just like, hey, I'm all for renewables, I'm all for renewable technology where it makes sense.
Right.
And he was explaining his views about oil and gas and his views about renewables, and then just mentioned that like here in Alberta, energy is thought of as oil, gas, and just hydrocarbons.
Mm-hmm.
But out east in Ontario, I believe he was saying that energy is thought of electricity, so maybe more hydroelectric dams and the other kind of end of the spectrum. But still, in both cases, here in Alberta, we do have hydro. We do have. We're starting solar panel projects, and out east they use and they import a lot of hydrocarbons.
Mm-hmm. And some of the biggest solar farms in Canada are being built right now down by Calgary, aren't there? I'm pretty sure the biggest and the second biggest are being built currently in Alberta.
I'd have to Google that, but that'd be cool.
But I'm pretty sure I have a buddy that was working on them. He was just telling me about just these massive fields of solar farms that we're putting in, right? And in Alberta, you don't hear about that because it kind of goes against that narrative of what Alberta is and what Alberta represents. And that's kind of the part that really gets to me, is just to see how it's represented. And where do you guys, I have my own opinions on this, but where do you guys think that comes from? And when do you think it started? I mean, it's always kind of been around, but it seems like it's really ramped up lately. I mean, polarization on everything has ramped up. Polarization in itself has kind of become the norm for
normal.
Almost. Yeah. This is almost more of a new normal than COVID, it seems, right? Just everything politicized and polarized to these ends. But I mean, media, we've already mentioned it a couple of times. That seems to be one of the biggest ones. And social media, to me, is almost even bigger than that, because social media gives anybody a voice, and especially you don't need to have a check on your energy literacy and how much you understand these topics to go on to Twitter or onto Instagram and say it. And there's
whatever.
And there's a lot of social capital to saying some of these things that's attached, and that's what's unfortunate. There's no social capital to being nuanced and having a really well-rounded view on this. But if you go to one side or the other, you can get a lot of pats on the back by being completely anti-oil or completely pro-oil, anti-environment. There's a lot of social cookies that you can get, and that makes me worried, because now it's pulling people away from this nuanced view like you guys were presenting in your letter. And I think that's doing a lot of damage. But where do you guys think that started up, and where do you guys see the big pillars of that?
Was Skye frozen? I don't know. I don't know when it started, but I think it's more of a possibly a pride thing, that like we're proud here in Alberta to have this resource that has supported Canada. And I think that's kind of where it just started as a pride. Like, I'm proud of our resources here.
Yeah.
But then it got to such an extent that what we were proud of was being attacked.
Yeah.
And villainized, and that just ramped it up, saying like, well, why are you hurting my livelihood? I think it kind of hit the head on the more a personal level.
Yeah.
For some people within Alberta, that they're proud of this energy industry. Why are you not
cutting down at it? Yeah. And I think a big piece of that, even on the literacy, is I think a lot of people don't understand, even at the very basic level, the amount of Canada's GDP that is provided by it. And just, if you're going to be, demonizing it and saying all these things about it, you have to understand something needs to take its place. And if it's 20% of the GDP or whatever it is, that's a big chunk of what Canada runs on it, and what makes all these things you love about Canada, the healthcare and all these things tick. You need to have some sort of industry, and you can't just, without a plan. I mean, there's obviously things that we need to move away from, but you have to have a plan for it. You need to do it in a smart way so that you're not causing more damage in other ways when trying to solve damage in one area, right? Specifically the environment. And
I think I'm going to add that to the other side, though, that I feel that the other side wasn't feeling like pro oil and gas people were listening to their concerns about environment. Like, we're not going to have a world for our children. We're going to be burning up, and I don't know.
Yeah.
But just another just hardcore, because they're passionate about the environment.
Of course. Yeah.
So I think it started I think where battles started to become and really split. It stopped being about resources versus climate. It started being personal values
Ideologies.
versus
Yeah.
personal values. And when you're attacked personally, I feel it goes like how it's been going, that
And
instantly divide and
Yeah.
fight.
yeah. Yeah, as
And
soon as you're attacked, you double down, and that makes the other side double down, and it kind of builds itself up, and the both sides kind of ramp up into each other and kind of leave us into a position like we are now a bit.
Yeah, I think.
and I think like with this polarization too, like to get where we're at, I think it's also too is a lack of knowledge.
For sure, that's a
A
huge.
lack of knowledge, like if you like, I know for myself, if I don't know something, like there's naturally a fear like of the unknown, and
Mhm.
um yeah, and that brings on the emotions and everything, and so it drives. That's also a driver with that, is just the amount of energy literacy people have regarding the natural resources, both renewable and non-renewable.
Yeah, for sure, and it's tough when you're only you're only inundated with one side of it, and it makes it really hard for you to be literate on whichever side you fall on, the opposite side, right? Growing up in Alberta, it was hard to get a really well-rounded view about the environment and that until I went to school, and then I got that side, and it was pushed to the other side. It wasn't nuanced, but now I got a really good idea of what the other side's arguments are, and it helped me kind of find a really nice balance in the middle. But usually if you're growing up in Alberta, you're going to be kind of pushed to the one side. If you're growing up outside of it, you're kind of pushed to the other, and you don't get that real intuitive literacy for the other side's arguments, and it just sounds like they're trying to protect their ideology, right, at the end of the day.
And I think the East Coast needs to be tossed into that as well, because right now they are still struggling with their offshore assets.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that I think we should stop getting away from, is because we just chatted with someone else at the Geo convention, just saying like, yeah, like I understand where you're coming from, Alberta, but at the same time, you also need to think about East Coast, because
Yeah.
I think Newfoundland is also struggling with their industry too, right, Skye?
Yeah, no, they're
Yeah.
really struggling over there, and so
So
and
another,
like that message we're like also carrying like with us, it's like it's not just like an Alberta problem or BC
Right.
problem,
Yeah.
it's Canada problem, and
Mm-hmm.
like we should in essence have this like Canadian pride of supporting each
Yeah.
other,
Yeah, you're
uh,
right.
and so
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think I still fall into that trap of defending Alberta too much because
oh
it is
yeah,
something I love. And you're very right, Skye. It should be it's Canada's resource, so we should be proud of it, and we should be proud of can. The thing that gets me a lot of the time is Canada is so far forward on the environmental front with our energy industry, and we do try to do everything right as much as we can, and we try to put policies in place to help, and we try and do environmental impact assessments. So when you compare that to other countries, not just Alberta versus when you just take Canada's environmental protocols and put them side by side with even someone like America, which is probably closer when you compare that to like Venezuela or Saudi Arabia and all those kind of places. And if your goal wasn't the environment and the global environment as a whole, you would think that you would go to the place where the damage is being done the most. And if we realize that we have an energy demand and we're going to have to fill it, it should be, if you want to decrease the supply of that, you should decrease it from the place that are causing the most economic damage first, right? Say you have you take your energy demand and it's just 100 whatever units you want to use. I mean, on the grand scale, but let's just call them energy units.
nice.
And you realize you need this 100 energy units, and that could be, all these countries could produce, Canada can maybe produce 50 of those units if all the world decided we want Canada to be they do it the best, they defend the environment, they're going to be our energy source, and we're all going to buy from Canada. That should be how it goes. But right now it's who can do it cheapest. And a lot of the time that's what's hurting the environment is now if Venezuela can get oil out of the ground and process it cheaper because they don't have all these environmental impacts. And now Canada, it has all these protocols in place, but it now makes it this much more expensive. And now we're out of the market. We're in trouble there. But now who's hurt at the end of the day? It's the world, it's the environment, because now you're increasing the supply that's coming from it. That is something that I would really love to see, but that's what makes this so dangerous and hard to track down. Is now there's financial incentives for countries versus other countries to enact environmental regulation on other ones, right? It would really behoove even the US, and I think I've read a lot of articles on US based energy companies financing green initiatives in Canada, and parties that actively work against the energy industry, because financially that impacts them. If they can be if that allows them to get oil out of the ground cheaper and get their supply to market above the other one, that I'm not saying that's happening, but there is a financial incentive there. And when there's financial incentive, you always have to be worried, because if the wrong type of people are in there, and we've seen it around the globe, and that's just using US, for example, that's not to mention all these other countries, all the other oil producing countries that all are vying for this global demand. If you can hamstring one country that has a lot of supply, that really impacts yourself. And that's something that always worried me. And I think I like to think I have a nuanced way to look at it. But if you're maybe not as literate in some of these subjects, and you hear that, or you have people just whispering that in your ear, everything becomes a conspiracy theory. And now all environment, and it can work to the opposite side too, is now you tell that to some guys on a rig that, hey, the US is financing all these Green Party initiatives. They're automatically going to double down and really dig into them. But how do you have a nuanced conversation around that? Because there is financial incentive there. You have to look out for that, because just the way the world works, if there's financial incentive, things can happen. But if you say it without, it can kind of slip into that polarization right away. So much of this is so hard to keep it on the middle track without trying to assign any blame, and just have a conversation about it.
And that's where we're trying to change the narrative around this, because I think we've just gone down a rabbit hole, and we can't. I think this is a good time to mention that we met with a senior policy. Can you guys hear that?
What's that?
Okay, you can't hear it I just hear knocking and outside.
Oh yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
So as I was saying, we met with the senior policy advisor, and we were on this chat, and she's like, okay, what do you want to get out of this meeting with
Beep?
And we said, one, we want to help them, because I feel a lot of people are asking for demands and using a more of a angry approach.
Right.
Two, we want to help them change the narrative around resources here in Canada. We want to decrease polarization by increasing energy literacy.
Yeah.
And finally, try to have or influence the government to be more supportive of just Canada and stand up for Canada, and have just that being proud for Canada, like how Alberta's proud of Alberta and Ontario's proud for Ontario, and New Brunswick just proud of New Brunswick. That we just need to start being more united and proud of Canadian resources, and that's energy in general. And I think that's a way to hopefully start bringing these conversations together. And like, as you were saying, because like you get all these little nuances about money and power and power drive, that I think as soon as we start getting people to listen to like our letter, and like getting other people to listen to a neutral ground, I think that's when we can start getting on the right track of putting Canada first.
Yeah. I think you guys are on the right track for the best way for that to go about it. I think energy literacy and environmental literacy are the two things you need to put. As soon as you try and show one side or another's position, it all falls apart, because it slips into that polarization. But if you can keep things like you guys did so beautifully in your letter, of just keeping things kind of right down the center, showing both sides, just trying to bring facts forward for people to make their own decisions, that's what's really going to move things forward. It's just hard to get people's eyes on it. And I think that's why it's important to talk about it. And I think that's why it's so important what you guys are doing, is to get people's eyes on and get people to, have a read of something like that that's in the middle. It doesn't have any slant either way, and wants to show that there's real benefits on both sides. And it's a really tough thing to do. It's a hard tightrope to walk, but I think you guys are doing it greatly. And that's why I was so excited to see it, and so excited to have you guys on, because I think there needs to be more voices carrying that torch and really trying to move forward on that, because I think we've seen for years both sides trying to fight for their side and have people move that forward, it just kind of furthers polarization and pulls us away from the nuance. And that nuance is exactly like we said earlier, that nuance is exactly where the best things come from, right? With when you combine industry and environment together, that's when the real progress gets made. But the further we pull those two apart, we're actually hurting both sides. We're hurting industry and we're hurting the environment because we're not allowing them to work together like they want to. And we're demonizing, each side is demonizing the other.
Yeah. And it's just getting to a kind of in a deadlock situation.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the gentleman that we talked about at GeoCon, he had stats up on his slideshow, and he said, based on all this bickering between both sides, we have neither increased nor decreased our carbon footprint.
Right.
And he compared it to the States, where they do have a larger carbon footprint than Canada right now, but they have actually been able to work somehow to reduce their carbon footprint just on the stats they had. I wasn't sure. I think it was just based on carbon output within the country and just kind of very basic numbers.
Right.
But on those basic numbers, Canada is stuck, neither increasing or decreasing carbon output, whereas other countries are making progress on decreasing their output.
Yeah.
And so you hit a nail on the head. No one's winning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think getting people to be literate in that sense and to understand that that's going to be the first step in actually moving forward, is having people understand that what the strategy we're using currently, what impacts it's having. Because I think because all you hear is about, you only hear one side in media and social media. Now everybody doesn't understand. They think that we're doing really good. They think all these things are happening and we're making progress, but in reality, it's almost harming it, right? And I think that's the first step to having people kind of get on board and maybe we do need a new strategy, and that will open their eyes up to strategies like your guys's. And in your letter, are you guys looking for people to sign your letter as well? I had read somewhere.
Oh yeah, it's still open for people to sign on studentsforcanada.ca. And
Studentsforcanada.ca. Gotcha.
Yeah, you can be able to find it there. And it shows all the other things that we're working on. We have students that are blogging about the environment, and like it's a very diverse group of students that we have all part of this. Like we have students all the way from nursing to education to business to finances to engineering, and then into the environmental or scientists with geology.
Do people need to be students to sign it, or can anybody sign it?
Oh, anyone we've opened it. Anyone. When we first were emailing it out, it was geared towards researchers, academics, and students. And we've also opened it up for professionals across the country. And it was really cool because we were able to get a huge range of people. We have people, some of the people that we've signed, we have researchers within climate change, and as well as climate change policy. We have people in renewable energy signing this, hydro, ecology, biologists, researchers in that. And then we're also able to get people on the other side within the oil and gas industry signing it too as well. And so it really brought people from all different types of backgrounds together within the sciences. And that was something that we're pretty proud of. And then we also have, many concerned Canadians. That are
there's a
concerned about
mother. That added that as their title. She said a concerned mother for Canada.
Oh, nice.
And so,
And that tells me that there's a real hunger for this kind of knowledge and for that kind of nuanced perspective on this, and that even though what you might hear all the time, what you might be inundated with is one side or the other, there is a real hunger for a nuanced perspective, and people do have an understanding. There are a lot of people that are very literate in industry and environment and want to see. But if you're someone like myself, I like to think of myself this way, that is literate in both industry and environment, there's not really a team you can jump on, right? It's you feel like you're a soldier without an army, right? You're kind of on your own. And that, again, not to keep coming back to, but that's why I was so excited when I read that. I was like, oh, this is somebody that reflects my views. And it's so comforting to hear that there's more people out there and you're not so alone in those ideas of kind of a more nuanced idea. So how many signatures do you guys have already?
We have over 2,800 signatures.
Holy shit. Wow. Well done.
Yeah.
Well done. That's awesome.
it's slowly getting out there, and
Yeah. Hopefully this can get a few more on there.
We hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
For sure.
and like talking about like you're saying is like personally like along with like a few other people I know, I really felt alone on campus. I was like,
Yeah, for
like
sure.
I see all this stuff in the media, and I'm like, I feel like I'd just get nixed if I like came out and said anything.
Oh yeah.
And just being like a student on campus and with this student group and stuff, I started walking around and talking to other students, and like I found it very interesting. About 16 out of 20 students I talked to were all in support of Canadian energy.
Wow.
Of the resources. Like I walked around and was like, hey, would you like a sticker supporting Canadian energy? And they're all excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I have a t-shirt that I wear to the gym. I love Canadian energy, and I get thumbs up in the gym.
Yeah.
I get a few weird looks or like faces looking at me like, what are you doing? And then like the other like 4 people, 2 of them was like a hard no, like they didn't want to say anything, and then there's like 2 that were kind of like on the fence, like they like didn't really know what to think about it. But like the 2 that like said no, I'd ask them is like just like I really want to understand from their view, and I think that's where this whole like we need to promote more of this discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
And like talking to people, but like I'd ask them and they'd just like either like shrug their shoulders or they'd like give me like
What do you mean?
like what do you mean, like they're like,
Yeah.
haven't you seen the news, or like haven't you seen like the like what's out there and like what they're doing, and they like tell me that, and they had really nothing else like behind it, or like it was pretty empty and mainly emotionally driven with it. But like as I talked to them and try to like understand like where they were coming from, we were able to like really have a super positive conversation about it and like discussion about our like resources, and they were like at the end was able to leave it pretty positive message regarding the industry and a lot of things they didn't realize that was happening.
And it's just tough to get those conversations started. I think that's the biggest piece. Once you can get into a conversation with someone, the nuance comes out, right? Most people aren't as polarized as the media would make you think. More people are more towards the middle. But I think what scares me a little bit, or what scared me going through university, was definitely walking around campus and feeling that. But in the classroom, I found was very much, it was not even just the environmental class, but just there was no room for nuance. It was, you follow this side or you're not going to get the grades. You have to get onto this. And I feel like I was I'm very stubborn, and I stand by my values very staunchly. So it wasn't something that to me, no matter how hard it tried, even though I would write full papers from the other point of view that would very much not match up. I would be way more nuanced if I was writing it from my true place where I wanted to come from. But it didn't completely suck me over. But if somebody wasn't so staunch in their views, that could very easily sway them over to that one side where they're not even getting any of this information. They're locking themselves off from becoming energy literate, because just to engage in that is to commit some sort of faux pas. Like you say, you can't even give them time to listen to say their piece, because that's somehow supporting the enemy in how they're trying to make it out. And I think that's what worries me a little bit. About what kind of messages is being spread, because you combine that with, like you say, social media and the larger media sources. Yeah, it really doesn't. What gets me is I don't have a strong affiliation to which side you fall on. I just want people to be allowed to make that decision for themselves, right? I think they should be allowed the information for them to make an accurate assessment for themselves. But when all you're getting is one side or the other, right? And that goes to both sides. Growing up, I didn't get a very strong other side to be able to make my own decision. I did that myself, but you can only do that for so many people. Not many people are going to go and do their own research to figure this out. The majority, the majority, 95% are just going to take what's given to them and take that as gospel, right? So you have to be really careful about what is just handed over to people, and then also pass that work to have conversations like this that are from a place of nuance, and things like your letter that start to increase the literacy on both sides, that you can make those decisions for yourself, or even if you don't make a decision, at least help you navigate the world with a better understanding of how it really works, and not just what's been presented, right?
And that was a really cool part writing this letter, because we were able to learn more about the different technologies and just exactly what's going on. Because Skye and I are 100% for the environment, but we were more just strictly thinking on kind of the oil and gas side with carbon sequestration and just storing carbon underneath the ground so it's not within the atmosphere. But then now I'm kind of a hydrogen bandwagoner. I think hydrogen's just super cool.
Can you explain a bit about that to me?
Yeah, so we have with the hydrogen, like it's also it's not the silver bullet as the media is kind of portraying, but it is a way to reduce emissions for people who are using the energy.
Right.
And honestly, I don't think it's a way to reduce emissions for producing it, but for on the end user side, I think it is a really good place to start using hydrogen. But then there's two styles of hydrogen. There's green hydrogen that is using electrolysis, so splitting up water into oxygen and hydrogen.
Right.
And then having that stored, and then hydrogen within hydrogen fuel cells, which surprisingly Japan and Germany already have a lot of hydrogen fuel cells, and I didn't even know that. And then California, I was reading an article saying that there's likely to have more hydrogen fuel celled cars than the actual fueling stations for hydrogen.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool too. And then the other side, there's blue hydrogen that uses a water shift reaction to take CO2 and water to convert that, just to have CO and water to convert that to CO2 and hydrogen. And that's just breaking down your natural gas. And then you'd probably use sequestration to mitigate the issues with the producing the carbon dioxide.
Right.
But just having an end product that could help support where a majority of our emissions come from is from the user, and having a product that is actually combust and has a chemical reaction, but has no harmful byproducts.
Yeah, for sure.
At the end user side, whereas like really stressing that, because the end user side is super focused on in the media, but the producing side for hydrogen isn't really quite focused. So I think there needs to be a conversation about that too. But
to make sure that it's not causing more harm by producing it, if it is such a good product to use at the end goal, we just have to make sure there's a sustainable way to bring that resource to market, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I got you. And was between the two, I can't remember the two colors. I think one was blue, one was green.
Yeah.
Hydrogen. Would you say there's a difference in environmental impact on the two ways for bringing hydrogen forward? Is one way better than the other in your research, or you did not get that far?
I didn't get that far, but just for my own opinion, that both ways need energy to split the substance up into its
to get hydrogen on its own.
To get hydrogen, whereas electrolysis, you need a ton of water and a ton of electricity to split it up. So where's that electricity coming from? Probably maybe coal, and that would be the worst.
Yeah, and that's and that's a huge place that people need to. That's a big part that I see energy literacy for. Is so many people push towards things that are either use electricity to just any way you use electricity, you have to be cognizant of where that electricity comes from and what kind of breakdown it is. If it's coming from a coal-fired power plant, even if you're running your car on electricity, if that electricity was begotten from a coal-fired power plant, that's not very environmentally friendly.
Versus LNG or something like that, where you can actually have a smaller footprint versus coal.
And Canada has such a vast LNG rich environment. We're so primed to be one of the global leaders in LNGs, but it kind of falls into that same category where it's into that oil and gas industry, so it gets demonized the exact same way everything else does. But it could be a huge step forward away from some of these more environmentally impactful ways of producing electricity and producing all these sorts of things. But it kind of gets demonized, and that's very unfortunate. So what is your guys'? I want to get back to. I know you said carbon capture, and I'm really interested in that. I would love to get a breakdown on that. But how do you guys see LNGs fitting into this picture? I know that was another big part of your a letter I read. So
yeah,
how do you guys see that fitting in?
Well, it's pretty huge because with like LNG, it can displace quite a few emissions. Like with the LNG, oh, trying to remember the stats, but
do you have the letter up?
Yeah.
I have it up, but I can't help you. I've already read it 3 times. I think that's as much as I can get. But
well, like when we wrote this thing, we wanted to make sure we hit every single point we could as concisely as possible, just to get out like a big push at the beginning. So that's why it's so big.
Yeah,
but we wanted to
it starts conversations. Yeah, no, for sure. I thought it was very well written, and it just from my own university degree and those environmental classes, I saw you guys hit so many of the important points that I saw that I never hear after I finished those classes. I never heard about them again. Never heard another word about carbon capture in social media or the media. I've never heard all those things about hydrogen and things like LNGs. You know what I'm saying? It just kind of fell off the face of the earth after I left that.
Well, and it's like. With like LNG and like the capacity that we're able to do, this is just an example that came out, a joint study between Johns Hopkins University, U of C, Michigan, and MIT, as well as a few other universities, is that Canada has a capacity to displace up to 40 coal-fired power plants in Asia.
Wow.
Which is like equivalent to removing 80% of the cars off Canadian roads. And so that is like pretty significant. And as well as it's not just like, and so that's amazing, just for like climate action and environmental sustainability, like as a good start. Technology is innovation is going to continue, but as well as right here, the BC said, so it's going to while reducing GHG emissions for other countries with LNG, it is projected to provide $23 billion in new government revenue for British Columbia. Wow. So like you can imagine like how many more hospitals they can have, how many more schools can be built, and like the infrastructure that can, be built to sustain, the people there and services too as well. Yeah. Oh, and all the jobs that come with it.
Yeah, for sure. There's so much that goes into those on the second and third order markets that come with that, of just all the jobs it creates, and then there's extra tax on top of that might be calculated into that initial number. But it's just the impact is so huge.
And whether like whatever resource you're using, whether it's non-renewable to renewable, like everything has a cost. Like everything has a cost attached to it. There's always pros and cons to everything. There's not a free ride with everything, and that's part of like educating, having that energy literacy and that understanding. Because when you start, looking at your different renewable projects, or as you start looking at some of your non-renewable projects, like, the effects that they have on the environment, like there's always something that has to give. And so
there's no such thing as a free lunch.
And and there's no such thing as free energy.
That is true.
I think that's like a really good point, that even with like hydro dams, like they're amazing and they work well, but they do have a life expectancy, and you would have to maintain and recreate just different aspects of it. So there's a constant maintenance with that. So that's something that you have to consider. And then the land usage that it floods.
Yeah, that was a huge thing. I didn't realize. When I went into these classes, I started learning about hydro electricity and the impacts that it can have on upstream and the flooding and stuff, which is something that I think Canada does well, and is another thing that I think Canada can be proud of. We try as best as we can to research those impacts beforehand and really happen. Whereas when I did a project on, I can't remember the name of the dam, but I think it was the biggest dam in China, and just the way they went about it, I think it was. And just the amount of the homes that they displaced without helping their people, they just said, no, this land is our now. It's all going to be flooded. The environmental, like the forests that were overrun, the ecologies that were overrun by it, just with no thought, just because they wanted to build this giant dam that was going to provide all this energy. But the people and the environment that were harmed in the process was just mind numbing. When I started to research, I did a whole project on it, and I couldn't believe it, because I didn't even know. I always just thought, because that's what you're portrayed as, oh, hydro is good. There's no, I never had heard any of the bad sides of it. But once I got into it, it was like, oh man, you do have to put some real thought into this and do it the right way, which I think Canada tries to do. But like you say, there's no free lunch. You're going to have impacts, but they try to lessen that as much as possible, which is what Canada does with all our energy, right?
You're true that like Canada should be proud about our resources, and that's another resource that Canada should be proud of is hydroelectricity. And we have the governance and the political kind of standing to make sure we do mitigate issues regarding hydroelectricity.
Yeah.
And I think that's something like, because there's with on social media, a lot of Action Canada, I think you've heard of them, but they're really trying to push just more energy, like just pride. So that was cool. So a couple of the LinkedIn quotes and like posts that I've been seeing is like, we're world, they're leaders with hydro, we're producers of, I actually didn't even know the mineral, and I feel like a really silly geologist, but I couldn't pronounce it. But something that was used for computer screens and just other technical devices. And you hit the nail on the head that like, there's no free lunch, but Canada does it right. So it's like a less expensive lunch.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we should look for. And that's what I guess when Canada is trying to, and I'm so proud of how Canada does these things, when people just attack how we're going about it, when you see other countries like China, when they do it, they don't even put any sort of forethought into it. And not only,
we don't know that, but it doesn't seem like they do.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I'm doing a little bit, but just with the amount of homes and the amount of families that were just put out of their homes, had their homes flooded with no, they weren't given any housing to move in, no compensation. That's the word I'm looking for. There was no compensation. And that was something that just at the very least, that would never happen in Canada. Well, I think there's probably some arguments I could make a couple arguments to the opposite of that, but for the most part, they're at least making an effort for it. It's at least a value on their totem pole of values. It's on there at least, where it seems like other countries, it's either very low or not on there at all. And I think when people want to just attack the energy industry, they should be looking at it from a holistic point of view of where it ranks against others. If you're going to go after the first ones, go after the worst ones first and try and mitigate. If you want to bring down the amount of as a whole, start with the worst ones and bring them off. And if Canada is always up near the top, then we shouldn't have to worry about it as much. We still need to be always moving forward, always innovating, doing all those things, right? Carbon capture. And I'd really love to get a breakdown, because I know that was a big piece, and that was something that I had done a lot of research into. I think one of my big projects was on one of the bigger Shell carbon capture projects that they had just done, and it was very interesting. I'd never even, before I did that course, I'd never even heard of this as a technology, right? And I just wanted to maybe give the listeners a little breakdown of what that is and how it works, and maybe some of the bigger projects that Canada's a part of for
that. Maybe we should take a break and go back to
take a break. Okay, for sure. We'll take a bathroom break, and then we'll come back to the carbon capture. All right, part 2. Thanks for being here again, guys. I know I was really excited with our chat last time, and I've been thinking of even more stuff to go over. And I think at the end of our last chat, we were just getting into some of the newer technologies. So just to start off, how are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Doing great.
Awesome. Yeah. So last time we were kind of just about to get into the newer technologies. I think carbon capture was one of the ones that, like I had said, I think on the last one I had done a project on it. So that's one of the only of these new technologies I'm a little bit aware of, but maybe we could just go through some of the ones that you guys see on the horizon that maybe we don't need to get into too detailed breakdown of what they all are, but just so that people are aware of what is on the horizon for new technologies on the environmental front that are going to be changing the game coming forward.
Yeah. So which carbon capture project did you work on?
I believe it was a Shell one. I mean, like I said, my 4 years of university were a lot more fun than I think they should have been. So I don't remember it fully, but I'm fairly certain it was a Shell one that we did, and it might have been one of the first ones if memory serves.
The Quest project.
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I think that was the one.
Because I think that's the one that's well known, and I just want to So yeah, the Quest is an oil sands project run by Shell, and I think it was sold to CNRL after, and it was started in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And within our letter, we give the breakdown of how much carbon that it actually captured.
Okay. And carbon capture, as I understand it, is just they build facilities underground that they take carbon and actually it's actually what the name sounds like. It's very it's very straightforward. They just capture the carbon under the ground to take it out of the atmosphere.
So that's where our understanding is too, and through TAing EAS 100, that you can use specific rock chemistries in the
Oh
ground
wow.
to like cause chemical reactions for it to bind with. So apparently, serpentine is a mineral that can be used to help the process of carbon sequestration. But that's the farthest that I know of how it actually works. It seems very complicated, but companies are understanding now that to have a future within hydrocarbon exploration, that sequestration is going to be at the forefront now. And I've talked to a couple companies, and they're like, "Yeah, we do have projects on the way and getting there and trying to make it work way better because it's not a new technology; it's kind of an old technology that's getting more use out of it now."
Okay.
Yeah, and so really, like they're just taking the emissions, your CO2 emissions from like different factories or plants, or like even they have things set up in the air to capture it in the air, and so like just like the Quest project, because that was kind of like the leading project like within the world, like it was kind of like the Kickstarter. It was here right in Alberta, and like so a lot of people like don't really know is like even before all like we see what's going on like politically surrounding climate change and like the environment like that's been happening over the 1 to 2 the last few years. This Carbon Quest project, this carbon capture storage project, started in 2015, and and so far it's actually stored over 5 million tons of CO2. And so that is equivalent to over 1.125 million annual vehicle emissions that's been stored in the ground.
Wow.
And so from this project, there's like, with all these initial projects, they're constantly learning how to improve and like how to make it economical and all these technologies. And like with Shell and with like this technology, it's being shared across the world. Like other countries started to implement what we started here. And to follow our example, like such as like Australia, they have a carbon capture project there, which is to capture 3 to 4 million tons of CO2 per year.
Wow.
And it's just crazy. It's more than like the electric vehicles sold in Canada combined from 2013 to 2018. Like the amount of vehicles that are being removed from the road. And so it's like we mentioned earlier, it's a balance of everything. It's not just carbon capture is one of the elements, one of the innovating technologies we're, going to be using to move towards having that net zero in the future. And so it's like, yeah, we're going to use electric vehicles. We're going to be using this new technology, and we're going to be using many other technologies, which we'll touch on here.
Yeah, no,
And
for sure. Go ahead.
Oh, it's just things we need to be proud about, and like a lot of people don't really know that, like, we're the stomping grounds for quite a lot of things that we see happening in the world today. So
yeah, and that's one of those things where you wouldn't know that Alberta and Canada was such a leader on the environmental front in technologies like that, because it doesn't get the coverage that you think, but it is. And yeah, I think you're very much on the right track with that. Something we need to be proud of. And kind of going back to what we said on our last little chat, there was it comes from industry. It's industry led, right? There was no governmental policy that forced them to do it. It was them that brought it forward, and then they were the ones that are bringing it around the globe from the president that they sent. So I think that's really cool and something that we should be proud of. And then what other kinds of new technologies do you see kind of on the forefront coming in, whether it's Canadian led or Canadians adopting it from other places around the world? What else is there on the forefront?
Before we get into that, though, there's actually 3 other carbon capture storage projects here. The 2 are in Saskatchewan, which is the Boundary Dam and the Weyburn. So there's a company here in Calgary that does work on the Weyburn, carbon capture facility, and that's Canada led too, and it's doing great. And then Alberta Carbon Truck Line is also doing carbon capture. And again, it's just not like a silver bullet that one thing's gonna solve the issue. Like carbon capture is not gonna solve the issue, but like what Skye said, it's gonna be a combination of all the other technologies.
And it's like, it's not just like that alone. Another new technology that's being developed here in Canada is the hydrogen, the blue hydrogen we're hearing a lot about, and that's being Canadian born with the technologies that they're developing there and in Saskatchewan, which is actually pretty neat.
Yeah,
and so
awesome.
and so essentially is Daniel knows more about this process than me, but it's pretty neat. It's because we have all these hydrogen compounds or hydrocarbon compounds, which is basically long chains of carbon and hydrogen attached to each other, and they're able to do through a chemical reaction to separate them and to get hydrogen, as well as just leave the carbon in the ground and just extracting hydrogen, whether it be used for hydrogen fuel cells, for power generation, and like for many other uses that we see, since it's such a needed commodity.
Right. Yeah, that's so cool, and something. I don't want to jump right to policy because I think there is still more technologies to get to. But I'm also interested, maybe after we're done discussing these new technologies, is talking about how policy helps support and sometimes inhibit some of these kind of procedures too. Because I think I've seen just in the past what policy does, and just something that I've always looked for is some accountability to when these new policies are enacted, to say what their mindset and what have they looked at all the factors and made sure that they're calculating all these things into play, and making sure that they're taking a fully well-rounded view. And then after maybe a couple of years in, I could, like I said, we'll jump into it later, but I can name a few policies where there was immediate backlash that hurt Canadians, but there was no accountability to it, right? So that'd be something I'm sure we'll get to, but that's a pretty big topic. So maybe we'll wait. If you guys have any other technologies that you'd like to discuss, any other programs that are encouraging these technologies.
Well, there's one, like, with the kind of understanding that we want to move towards more renewable energy and you use the usage of solar and wind. Right. But one of the inhibitors to that is battery storage. So there's another company called Hydrostore that we mentioned in our letter that actually uses excess energy from the grid to pump compressed gas or like air into a cavern, or just like an engineered tank, that you use the excess energy that's not being used from the renewable or even hydrocarbons that goes into the ground. You store that air, and then once you need a higher push and energy demand, you have that air stored like a battery that you can release from the cavern, that turns a turbine that then also starts generating electricity. So that's kind of another Canadian innovation that's trying to say, like, hey, how can we think about this differently, and using compressed air as a battery in essence.
Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I'd never actually heard of that. Because I know when I did a couple projects on renewables, and specifically solar, and one of the biggest inhibitors to it really catching on was how exactly that there was times where they would only let you sell back to the grid at certain times. And there were peak times when you were using it in your own home, right at 8 a.m. when everybody's getting ready for work. They'd allow you to sell back to the grid then, but you're using it at your own home. And then while you're at work during the day and the demand is lower, they wouldn't let you. And because there was no, it was just excess, and they didn't want that. So they weren't providing incentives for people to put solar on their houses, because there was no buyback incentives, and now you're just eating all that upfront cost. But if you can find a way, like you say, to make it so that if there is excess demand being captured, that we can find a way to store it like a battery and reuse it after. That's a great idea, and it really helps push forward and make these policies that are in place. We can change those policies to make it so it's more efficient and more cost effective for residential and commercial use of these new renewable technologies. So that's a great idea.
Exactly.
Really cool.
Yeah, no, it was like it was really neat to see, and that's what just
Oh,
getting this letter together, like
yeah.
we really need to understand all sides
I
and then
wonder if they
have
could. Sorry, I have an idea
yeah,
to
go,
throw
go,
past
go.
you, and this might be a stupid ass idea that would never work, but I wonder with the carbon capture if they found a way where they could, store all that carbon on the ground in one tank, have another tank that's empty, and pressurize the one, and then when you need to, just let all that pressure out and let it flow through a turbine and go to the other one. Oh, I guess, but certain laws wouldn't allow that. I guess that'd be like having what are those machines called? Perpetual motion machine. I guess if you had that, there's got to be something in there that I'm missing, because you'd have to use energy to repressurize it after the fact. But I'm just trying to think if there's a way to have pressurized gas underneath and you have carbon capture. That's kind of like pressurized gas. I was just having
Yeah.
an idea. Sorry to interrupt you.
No,
No, that's
like this is awesome because it's like this is where ideas start, is just
Mhm.
throwing things around, and it's like, hey, how about this? How about that? And it's
Yeah.
like one of my internships. Like they took all of us summer students. This like we were getting paid. It was a whole day. They threw us into this room together, broke us up into teams, and it's like on the board is like, here's a problem, and all right, come up with a solution, and then you guys have to pitch it to everyone. And
Yeah.
so like we just had to come up with some of the craziest ideas, and like that's what they're looking for, is innovation, these
Mhm.
out of the box thinking,
Yeah.
so that we can move forward. And so that like this discussion here is just got me excited, because it's just like that's kind of like the thrill
Mhm.
of it, is like they're open constantly, they have their ears open to all their
Mhm.
employees, and like outside of the company as well, as like how can we address these problems. And that's where we see some of these other outside companies, or like research institutes like Alberta Innovates or COSIA, which is I know a bit more about, just from we mentioned with them in our letter. Like COSIA is for those who don't know, is the Canada's Oil Sands Innovation Alliance. And so I can't remember exactly when they came about, but it was actually quite a while ago, and it's just a research group. They're looking at greenhouse gases. They're looking into remediation. How can we handle tailings better?
Mhm.
How can we address issues or problems with water
Right.
surrounding the industry? And this is all driven by and funded by our oil sand companies here in Alberta.
Right.
And also they've opened up for like international companies as well to jump in with this like kind of consortium or this group,
Mhm.
to be able to help address and solve these problems. And like when people start pitching ideas and research and thinking together, like it really accelerates things. And one thing that like a lot of people didn't realize, this is actually kind of pretty cool, is so they created a prize. So it's called the NRG um, COSIA Carbon X Prize.
Okay.
And what it is, it's a $20 million international competition put on NRG and COSIA to turn CO2 emissions into everyday products.
Wow.
And this started all the way back into 2015. And so
Mhm.
they saw this problem. They see what can we do with carbon, and so they essentially opened up this international competition where like even myself, I could have joined, created a team
Mhm.
of people, and it's like, all right, let's figure out ways of how we can turn these emissions into everyday products. And it's actually quite interesting to see all the different products they have. And it's like what can be one of the things is like with carbon emissions, you can turn it into carbon fiber, which is
Okay.
extremely strong, very light. And
Mhm.
so, like with vehicles, it improves efficiency. The lighter your vehicles are, the more fuel efficient it is, the less weight it's carrying around, and
Yeah.
it's also very strong. They have a lot of other products that they're doing as well, like shoes, clothing. Um,
Graphene? Because it isn't that like I remember hearing years ago that was going to be there's going to be so much technology boom out of graphene, right? Which is same thing as carbon fiber, right? You're just taking those really small carbon molecules and arranging them in a certain molecular format that is extremely strong, just like carbon fiber is, right? Light and strong, and these graphene tubes that are on the molecular level that just have these amazing properties, right? And it all stems from carbon. I mean, everything's based on carbon. Everyone, carbon is almost a bad word in everybody's life, but we're made of carbon, right? Everything in the world is based off carbon, right? It's not that dirty a word when you can put it in the right context. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, and it's like some of the things that like encourage people about, like, if you want to learn more about all the different technologies, like this,
I think you went mute
resource, this website for COSIA is just an excellent place that you can look at. And so,
wait, could you restate that, Skye? You were muted just for a sec.
Was I?
Just for a sec there, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the website you can like be able to learn about these things is COSIA. So just COSIA.ca, and you can be able to like explore all these different initiatives and problems. Like there's just so many. Like you pop open the list and it's like what's it's almost overwhelming with all the different things they're working on, and it's giving this new perspective to carbon, and that like they have a lot of other research groups, and so it's like and right here is that the carbon can be able to be part of our future, and so it's really cool. Here, I'll see if they have a running list.
Okay, and then I'll try and tie that back to some of the things we're talking about in our first conversation, but because like hearing you say that, Skye, of getting thrown into a room with a bunch of people and trying to get those out of the box ideas, that's exactly where change comes from, and innovation. It's always those kind of third party out of the left field thinkers that really make the big changes. And I feel like that's a big fear of mine, is with this polarization to it's either all bad, we need to shut it down completely, or this isn't a problem, we don't need to even be working on this, kind of that drill person or mindset we were talking about. That pulls you away from all that innovation that's in between those two poles. It's all somewhere out in the middle, and the more things you can incentivize like that, like putting financial prizes on bringing those off the wall kind of ideas forward, I just love that idea, because I think just in this sense but I think that in everything, I think with so many things in the world getting polarized, we're really getting away from the meat of the good ideas that are always somewhere right in the middle of the two sides.
And that's we've already seen that pipelines have been proven to work effectively, and that we don't move sewage in trains. So why would we move a dangerous possible chemical through trains too?
Right.
Or ships. And that's like where this innovation, like we can't get a pipeline east for Alberta. So they started shipping crude from Alberta down the Panama Canal and up to Newfoundland.
Yeah, it's wild.
And it's just like, you hit the nail on the head that like this divide is actually harming more than doing any good.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was kind of hinting to earlier about the policy decisions, and I'd really like to see the full thinking behind some of their policy decisions, because if the environment is your number one goal, if that's what you're saying is your number one goal, and you now have to put oil on a ship to go all the way down through the Panama Canal and up through to Newfoundland, right, instead of a pipeline, you're causing so much more emissions, and like you say, you're hurting more than you're helping it with what your stated goal is, right? And I think that's also something where it's just all about the demonization of what you show in the media, because pipelines, if you actually look at it just from a factual perspective with no dog in the fight on either side, and you just lay them out side by side, it is a much safer alternative than how much we're going by train. And you don't see all the other industries that you hurt by overloading your rail system with things like that, like trying to get grain around, like all the farming industries that are upset. If anybody works in an industry where you're dependent on CN or the other big rail one in Canada, if you're ordering rail cars of fuel, for example, they're not going to arrive. If they say they're here Friday, that's going to be next Wednesday or the following Friday. It's never when it is, because we're so overloaded with that. And then you see tragedies like we saw in Quebec, where there's a derailment where
Oh my goodness,
people's lives are cost for that. But that's not, you aren't, because there's no accountability on policy to show the thinking they're putting behind. We don't know if they're factoring those things in, because it really seems like they're not. And it seems like if they were taking a step back and really looking at it from a non-biased perspective, they would see some of these things. But because there's no accountability for what their thinking was behind the policy and why there's so much push behind, it seems like they're more dictating to what people are being loud about on Twitter. But you can't do that. You need to be looking at things from a non-biased perspective, especially with what we see with social media and how easily influenced it is for third parties to come in and make fake accounts and influence public policy. There's so much of public policy over the last 10 years has been influenced by social media, and that's so scary to me, because it's
terrifying.
It's the easiest way to influence. Anybody can go, there's been documented accounts of foreign entities just having the full buildings just full of people making fake accounts just to influence policy. And you see that, and there's actually, like we said on the first one, there is financial incentive to hurt the Canadian oil industry in favor of some of the other ones, even though we are on the forefront and one of the most environmentally friendly or have the best environmental policies in terms of all industries, energy aside, just any industry. But energy is one of those ones that has a lot of geopolitical pull on the global stage. So you really see it, and it puts a magnifying glass on it, and there's a lot of money flying back and forth. But it's just one of those things where I just wish there was more accountability with policy, and we could really show what went into this decision. Okay, you want to block a pipeline. Okay, what was your thought process? What are you just listening because there was a lot of things on social media saying they were against it, or did you actually lay out all the facts and do these type of things, right? So that's just what
the risk versus benefit versus other methods of transportation.
Exactly. You have to take everything into a fact. You can't leave any externalities on the table. If you take an economics class, that's the first thing they tell you. Like the biggest impact on people is unaccounted for externalities, right? If you're not taking those, and that's the biggest thing, that for a long time it was the other way, where there was a lot of unfounded negative externalities on the environment that weren't being calculated in. People were making money hand over fist, and the environment was the one taking the kicking, right?
Yeah.
And I'm fully behind that, and that needs to change. I think you guys see that as well, right? But there has to be a middle ground. You can't swing the total other way. Now that the environment is the one, and all industry is taking the kicking because you're not taking all the other externalities into place, you have to swing back to the middle, and that's how it seems like that's how things shift, and that's how pendulums swing. But you have to be very careful of who's influencing those, because if there's financial benefits for that pendulum to swing to one side or the other, you have to take that into account and make sure that you're not being unbiased, even without realizing it.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing with go on, Skye.
Oh, you can.
Just go. Understanding with the financial aspect of it, that it is. It would be a lot harder to stay in this industry if we keep on getting hit like this, and to maintain a foothold that Canada has with being a leader with innovative technology and being a leader in environmental protection.
Yeah.
And if the market gets taken from Canada, it's going to be shifted to somewhere that it's cheaper to drill, cheaper to export.
Exactly.
And it's again going to be, at this point, then it's a global issue, because carbon dioxide isn't biased to which country it comes from.
That's exactly what I was saying. With policy, there's a clear example of that, Dan, when they put in the carbon tax in Alberta. There was multiple huge companies that just said, well, you know what, we're gonna cease operations in Alberta, and we're moving down to Texas, right? And Canada, well, now Ovintiv, because they couldn't be, and Canada, Canada down in the States, because they moved their headquarters down to the States, right? Because and that's what I'm saying. And if your goal for that carbon tax was to lower emissions globally, now you've just moved that supply that was being done in the most environmentally conscious country in the world, in terms of energy, down to the States, which I'm not going to say they're the worst one in the world. I could definitely name a few countries that have a little less, but it's definitely not number one. And I'd be, scared to call them number two. Even I think there's I think a couple in the Nordic countries in Europe would have a couple things to say about that too, right?
Yeah.
So if that is their goal, that's exactly, I think you even said it, Dan. Sometimes these policies that are trying to do one thing are actually hurting the exact cause that they're trying to without realizing it. But that's what I'm talking about, where we need accountability. Okay, so now 4 years, 5 years later, after they made that policy change and we saw the direct impact immediately, what happened? These companies pulled up stakes and left and are now doing the same. If you're going to be fracking in Canada versus fracking in Oklahoma or Texas,
still fracking.
Yeah, but it's done with different environmental regulations surrounding it, right? If that's done in Canada, we know that there's certain, it's not perfect, but we know it's as best as we can make it, and we're always working on it. We're trying to be on that forefront. Where you go down in the States and it's not that, right? It's very worrying to me that there's actual policy being enacted without any consequence and no review after the fact to see, okay, we tried this, we had good intentions. I'm not saying they weren't trying to solve the issue. I see what they're trying to do, but when it's so obvious immediately the day after it's enacted that these big companies come out and pull, okay, that's a clear result of what you just did. Have we calculated it in? Was that a smart move? Do we need to rethink what we went for? Where in terms of some of the other things you say, where you put some financial incentives on moving forward in a positive instead of the punitive way, you see these amazing technologies arise, and on the other side, you see, in the grand scheme of things, the environment is detrimented, right? So it's just one of the things where I wish policy was more straightforward, more transparent, I think, and then also just on the back end when they're putting these policies in, we need to see what went through their mind to make sure that all these externalities are thought of. And then after the fact, we need to be reviewing them and come to us. It seems like in the world, nobody wants to say they made a mistake and they don't want to admit it. They just double down on, no, we did it. We still stand. Okay, we tried that. We were very clearly, we weren't trying to get these companies to move down to the States or pull up stakes and go to Russia or wherever else they're going to go drill. You just have to have a little bit of, I don't know.
Instead of direct motion, it has to bend a little bit, and that's
you have to be. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. It's got to have nuance, just like I said. I mean, this is one conversation, but on podcasts before, I've done. This is what almost 30 podcasts, and that's been a running theme throughout all of them. It's always somewhere in the middle. It's always nuance, but it just seems in every industry, not just energy. Like I said, it has a big microscope on it, but every industry is just pulling you to the polls to stop for the innovation and the nuance in the middle, because I think it's easier to control and it's easier to know, okay, that's in that camp, that's in that camp. I don't have to do any thinking. I can just easily pop a label on you, and I know where everything stands, where that's not where any real change happens. It's always in the middle. It's always with those out of the box thinkers. So, got into my policy talk a little earlier. I think there's still some more technologies probably to get to.
Oh yeah. And so like not even like technologies, but like some of the processes of like how they handle things really stands out here in Canada. So like for example, like with the oil sands remediation, there's like one person or spokesperson said like you can go to some of these reclamation sites and not even tell that there was a mine there, and like the guy says like that's the best part. That's when you know you've done a good job with reclaiming, and you can walk there and it's like as if you're you're in the middle of nowhere. You're around a lake or you're in a forest somewhere, and it's like, what, this used to be an oil sands mine. And so like some of the processes they do with the oil sands mine. So like initially, like before they even put the shovels in the dirt or in the ground, they go through a huge rigorous reclamation planning. And what they do is they pull in all these researchers, scientists, and create like a baseline assessment, environmental assessment, to understand the environment prior to operations. Right. And what they do is they collect seed collections, they collect native plants to the area. They do a count of the wildlife and everything. They don't just bulldoze trees over and burn them or anything. They collect it for just like your regular lumber. You salvage the lumber that is there. And because the oil sands, what they call is they have overburden. And so I know it varies based on companies of how much overburden that you can have, but typically they only go to 70 meters of max overburden. So it's pretty shallow. they don't go too deep. And so overburden is just like this dirt, soil, everything that's above your oil sands, your reservoir, or what your ore you want to mine.
Yeah.
And so they strip all of that away, and then they go in and then they do their thing. They extract oil sands we see with the oil trucks, and oftentimes in the news and that's another whole nother thing we can talk about. But then so they remove that overburden, the mining goes on, and they don't just rip up all the earth all at once. A lot of times, from what I know and what I see, is they do it in different phases. And so they have like phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and they finish with an area, and then they start infilling that area as they start with the new area, and then they kind of move along from there. So it's not just one big hole for the whole period of the mine. They're reclaiming as they're going.
Right.
And then they construct the landscapes, they place the soil and everything back. And then they have the researchers and ecologists and people go back in there and have a little playground of planting everything back up and introducing wildlife back to the area. And it's like you go to you see some of these areas, and the pictures are just amazing. It's just like, what?
And that's something like I kind of told you guys off the podcast, that was what my girlfriend did her master's capstone or thesis on, was oil sands reclamation. Exactly. So last November we went up to Fort Mac to take aerial photography. We went up in a plane, and it was November, very cold, and to take the right photos, we had to open the windows. So the heat of the engine in there is just fine. So the pilot and my girlfriend are up there just having the final time doing it. But I was just flying up from Grand Prairie, just small plane, so I just had a little bag. I didn't have any snow pants or nothing. So I'm sitting in this plane, curled up in a ball, freezing my balls off. I thought I was going to die. I was so cold. But anyways, that's besides the point. So she got this beautiful photography, and you can see exactly what you're showing. Exactly, you can see the current mines and stuff, and it looks, it's a bit hard on the eyes if you're honest, right? It's a bit tough to see. But then you look at the areas that they have reclaimed, and then also we went and drove around and went to these sites where they piled up. I can't remember the exact. I wish I would have looked this up if I would have known kind of where we were going here. But there was one something like maybe like Wood Buffalo remediation site or something, and it's this huge, like, it looks like a big hill. You wouldn't know if you didn't have this knowledge. You wouldn't know that this was a reclamation site, but all the overburden was piled up in this, made this huge hill, and it's all huge trees and stuff. And it's, I think, the only fully remediated site there. There's some that are still, because they get different classifications, like partially remediated, fully remediated as you go. And me and my girlfriend went through a walk. There's tons of, in her thesis, there's pictures. I'm actually very small in the background of one of her things. In the thesis, you can't even see me, but we got to walk through these places, and you can't even tell anything happened to it. It's amazing what they can do. And then we went to a couple that were partially remediated, and you can see, and they still look a little, you can tell a little bit, but the growth is starting. You can see that there's some decent sized trees in there, and it's amazing to me. I wouldn't have known if I wouldn't have gone up there and actually walked those sites. I wouldn't have known kind of what they could do with those remediation, because all you ever see is the current view, right? Those oversized shots with the actual mines themselves.
Trucks and
exactly, giant trucks and those type of things.
Well, and that's the thing. It's like those open pit mines, they only account for 3 to 5% of the oil sands. Is open pit mine. The rest is all underground SAGD, which has an even smaller footprint. It's all based off of small isolated pads, and they pump steam into the ground. It's a different way of to warm it up, and then they produce the bitumen, the oil, out of the ground, and so it's pretty cool.
Whenever someone attacks like the oil sands industry, they just plaster those pictures of trucks, and then they don't show like a side view of like in situ extraction of just like a pad
with trees around it, and caribou and bears,
caribou and wolves and all these other things. And they're just going away, pumping oil and saying hi to the animals. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's just very, and that's again like another energy literacy thing that we need to.
Well, and like other, like even like around SAGD, so steam assisted gravity drainage. So that's what we're talking about with like the in situ stuff. But like there's newer technologies that are being implemented, like with like solvent assisted, which is using some of your upgraded stuff and being circulated in the ground to help. Which like you don't need to pump in as much steam, and more effectively it can like upgrade even your bitumen within the ground, and then pumps it out, and that can be it's been reported up to like removing greenhouse gases up to 25%, and like other like enhanced bitumen recovery processes, it can be like another 60% can be removed with greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's like still even more technologies, and like these companies are constantly evolving their practices to be the most efficient
for sure.
around that. And so it's not static, it's very dynamic, like with innovation within these industries.
So even with longer term, that there are like the oil sands here in Canada isn't really just found here in Canada. There are other places around the world that has the same style of geological deposit. And thinking long term is like, okay, we put so much effort into these innovations and making sure we do it right. When all the other easy plays get picked up from companies, people are going to start looking at these oil sands deposits elsewhere. And again, with COSIA and all the like having a kind of a governing body for oil sands is going to not only benefit us right now here in Canada to reduce our emissions, but also then in the future when people start exploring for other hydrocarbon reservoirs.
Right. Yeah, it'll pay dividends down the road when people go to those, right? Because I know that is something where with the rise of fracking all over the well, mainly the U.S., that was what really changed the whole landscape of energy was the rise of fracking in the U.S. and in Oklahoma and Texas, all in those plays there, and that really changed the game. But like you say, once those start to go up, or if there's any changes to policy on a global scale on how we look at fracking too, because that's kind of one thing that I had heard here. Like one of the big things we look at, just like the oil sands. It used to be, and I want to talk tailings too, because that used to be the one thing, tailings, but then there's been huge leaps in innovations in how they work around tailings. And then it was kind of focused on the pictures of the mines, right? And that's the same thing with fracking, is that you always hear two things, earthquakes and water tables, right? And you see the pictures in Oklahoma, or the videos in Oklahoma of people turning on their taps and being able to light them on fire. But we've never seen that in Canada. And you see if you've actually been out to a frac site, which I don't know how many people can say they have. I've personally been to a frac site, and you talk to these guys and they're passionate about it. They care, and you go in and they show you all the sites and they go, oh yeah, and this is obviously just one guy saying one thing. I don't know how true this is. So take this with a big old grain of salt. But he's saying like we go down in stages. We use all this concrete to make sure that there's no breaks to make sure that it doesn't affect the water table. Then we put another sleeve, then another sleeve. So we have 3 layers of protection down all the way down to make sure that we never have breaches. We never are affecting the water table. We're never actually having this gas affect that. And he said down in the States, they only use one. And it's kind of one of those things, because it's not regulated and it's way cheaper. It costs a lot of money to really encase those holes to make sure you're putting the proper protection in. But he said that's why you see it. And it made a lot of sense, because I always wondered that. You always see like, there's a lot of fracking going on in Alberta, but I've never seen anybody light their water on fire coming out of their tap. But you see that down in the States. And then you see these companies with policy changes go, well, we're going to up and leave here and we're going to go down to the States. And it's like, man, that
fracking.
And with different environmental restrictions, that is a big worry to me. Of now, with a policy that you were trying to help the environment with, you've just caused all this detriment to water tables, and that goes for greenhouse gases. Like you said it perfectly. Greenhouse gases don't care what country it is. It's a couple thousand kilometers south, and it's not our problem anymore. We can sleep better at night. That's a big issue to me. If you truly do believe in the environment and you really care about it, you have to take those things into effect. And you can't, if you want to fight for the environment, you need to be energy literate to be able to make that fight effective. And it seems like, because it's polarized and you're not even supposed to even allow any propaganda, in big quotation marks, from the industry to affect the way you're looking at it, you're completely outgunned, and you don't know what your policies are actually affecting. You're putting policy in place without any real idea of what effects you're going to be causing downstream, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that at some point, I'm trying to remember back to all my schooling, but I know we had gone through kind of the evolution of tailings and all the different ones, because that used to be a really big issue with those tailing ponds. And then they said that one tailing pond has something like, I can't remember the dollar amounts, but it was something of like heavy metals and precious metals like gold and like platinum and stuff that are in them, that there was this big race on for technologies, for ways to, like, with magnets and different technologies to accompany all those. So now there was this super high financial incentive for remediation of tailing ponds, and that started this wave. And now there's been so many things that have gone over, and you see the little when you drive by tailing ponds in Fort Mac, you see the little bitumen, they call them. It's a little barrel with a little scarecrow on them floating around to try and keep wildlife out. Like, there's all these things that are trying to move it forward and remediate them. And then you'll see where, oh, that used to be a tailings pond, and now it's looks like you couldn't even tell what was there. It's amazing what you see, right? And then since that has happened, that's been less. I haven't heard as much about tailings ponds in the last few years. Like you say, they're really focused on showing pictures of the big trucks and the big mines. That's their,
New
that's their
target.
attack vector. Yeah, it's just attack vectors all the time. That's why Elon Musk said he was just going to sell all his stuff, because it's just attack vectors for people, right? If you take away all that, now they actually have to look at the content of what you're doing, and it's just one of those things where it seems like they'll find the new thing to attack, and then industry goes, okay, if that's what you're concerned, we're going to work on this and we're going to try and make it better for you, and then they'll just find a new thing to attack and get on that. And that's not the worst thing in the world, to keep them on their toes, keep them accountable, but that accountability needs to go both ways. If you're going to hold industry accountable and make changes on them, now policymakers, if you're making policies that are actually hurting the causes you're saying, where's the accountability to make those changes and to show that, right? That's what I want to see, because then we're really going to start cooking with gas. Now both sides are actually working towards environment and energy literacy on the same side, with effective policies and effective technologies. I guess that's the two sides that come from, right? On the one side, policy is what is their lever to pull, and on the industry side, technology is their lever to pull, right? And we see it kind of being forced, and then there's policies forcing them to not bring technology forward, and that's the biggest one. As soon as you're de-incentivizing industry from making these steps forward, that's where we're going to see complete steps backward and where we really want to go.
And then it just shifts to another country, and then we're back to square one. It's really not helping anything.
And that's always the thing that really points me towards, where is that coming from, and where is all that funding coming from? Because there's a lot of incentive for it to be pushed to other countries, right? For it to go away from it. There's countries that they're loving that. I saw a stat a couple of years ago where, due to certain policies and how much energy is draining right from Canada down into the States, it was like something like $3 million a day directly goes to U.S. pockets because of policies enacted that we could do here in environmentally friendly ways, or friendlier ways. I struggle to call environmentally friendly. You have to be have an idea of what you're doing, but it's just one of those things that it really blows my mind and makes it way more scary to me that we aren't fully investigating where this is coming from, and all this push and all this attacks on Canada's energy industry as a whole. There needs to be more awareness out of it, and it all comes back down. I know we've said it a million times, but it all comes down to literacy, right? And you have to be able to understand this stuff to see that, because once you do, and like you said, Skye, when you were going around the campus, you said if people would give you 10 minutes of time to talk about it, and you just give them a few points, their mindset would shift quite rapidly, right? I wasn't. Oh, really? That's how that works. Oh, but it's just about what do we do to get people there? And that's kind of something I wanted to ask you guys. I know it's polarized, but what are the small steps to increase the literacy, maybe both ways, right? How do we get the side that just wants to shut everything down and that kind of thing? How do you bring them to more center point of view? And then those people that are diehard, they don't think this is an issue at all. Where do you see the olive branches that can be extended across the aisle to bring people more towards that middle, where we already talked about the real good stuff is?
I can talk to that, and I think the biggest thing is listening. Out of anything that we can do is we need to be open, and we need to listen to their point of views, because they have concerns for a reason.
Yeah.
And so it's just really trying to understand where they're coming from, and just having that open discussion with them is the starting point. And so it's it doesn't help throw your hands in the air and yelling at each other, because that doesn't get us anywhere. And And like when I was talking to these students on campus, and was able to listen from their side, like some of them had pretty valid things, and some of them it was just like it's just what they've been seeing in the media. And like I've been talking to a few other students who it's actually, I think it's pretty common for people that kind of have that stereotype against the industry is like, they're these big bad oil companies. But as soon as they like get exposed or like they work as an internship in one, they like realize is like, holy smokes, like what's, like this isn't what I envisioned it to be. And like, and all the things that they're doing. And so it's just having that energy literacy, just having those open discussions with people on both sides, and so that we can just move forward with things. And like some of the concerns that they do have is that they are being addressed and they didn't realize that. And so they would bring up one thing and it's like, oh yeah, like they've been working on this since 2015, and they like look at you like, what, like and with their eyes wide open. And so it's just having those conversations with other people, with other students, with people that aren't around within our networks, and reaching out to people. And so that's the biggest hurdle, is having that energy literacy, having that knowledge of both renewables and non-renewables, and just putting aside those biases, and just have a desire to learn and be open. And really critically think about like resources. Like the internet hasn't really been helping us lately.
No.
Anyone can post anything online, and it's just having, I guess, that critical, like we have that research mind, and like critically think is like, all right, like you need to check your sources. Is this a good source or is this not? And it takes a little bit more work than, just putting in Google and find the first thing that pops up. And so, it's kind of the start.
I think you're so right with that. I think conversation is the biggest piece of it. And it's I think it's by design, and in a bigger sense than just this one aspect, but I think it's by design that conversation is the antidote to all the polarization. And they want things, they want you to just be on 140 characters on Twitter. They don't want a full conversation. They want it to be, 8-minute segments
knee-jerk reaction.
They want it to be very clipped. And then that's what I see the rise of podcasts and long form media, YouTube videos, where you can have somebody on, bullshit for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and actually get to the meat of some of these issues and talk to some of those things and get people to understand the other side. And I loved hearing what you said about, you see some of these people that are the staunchest opposition to some of these big oil companies, and one little co-op term, and you'll see people completely turn around. I got to watch it. So much of the people that during university, I was in Lister all 4 years, so I got to know a lot of the people around me quite well and know their worldviews. And now to see these people that used to be way on the other side of it come out from a co-op term or an internship, and they have completely flipped their script, and they're way more dead center, and they've seen both sides of it now. Like I said, kind of going through from the other side, and then having the university pull my pendulum back more towards the middle and getting a more well-rounded view of it. You see it go the other way, and I think that's what's really important. But it's just about how do we get more people to invest that time and to really, take that dive and try and put themselves in the other side's shoes to understand and just be pulled to the middle. It doesn't mean you have to completely flip. Now you were on this side, now you're completely jumped to the other camp. You see that happen sometimes, but usually that's pretty disingenuous. When you see a real change, it's usually towards the middle. And something that I think is an amazing tool, I heard it on a podcast probably 2 weeks ago, and I can't get it out of my head. It's called the ideological Turing test. Do you guys know what a Turing test is?
No, actually, but you need to send me that link after.
So Alan Turing was he was a computer scientist, I think, way back in the day, and he was working on AI back when they were using like ticker tape computers. So the Turing test was a thing with artificial intelligence. It was when there's certain parameters, and he wrote a whole paper on it, like the Turing paper, on when we do reach a certain level of artificial intelligence, when it'll be able to fool a certain percentage of humans. So there's these Turing prizes. So if you can make like a chat bot that you can go in and fool a certain percentage of people and not know, like you'll have to say after 10 minutes or an hour of talking to this thing, is it real or is it a bot? And taking that idea, but then and I think it's a really cool idea, and it's been expounded. There's all these prizes. There's so much surrounding. If you look into AI at all, Turing is kind of one of the forefathers of it. But then I heard this idea called the ideological Turing test. Can you take yourself and fully articulate the other side's argument in anything? I mean, just in this circumstance, if you're a drill oil field guy, could you take yourself and fully, instead of straw man, steel man the argument from the other side and say, could you go and argue with the drill guy effectively from the other point of view? That shows that you have that understanding. I think this is, in a broader sense, is for politics too, right? If you can't sit there and tell me what if you're staunchly on the left, you can't tell me from the right. You just think, oh, they're evil, they're stupid. That's not true. Now you don't understand their points. If you want to be, you need to be testing your ideas. And I just love that idea of everybody should be doing that, right? If you can't take yourself and say what the other side's perspective is, you need to do more research, and you shouldn't be so staunch in your beliefs if you can't even test them on the basic on the basics of the other, right? Take an expert from the other side and do a little bit of research, try and get it so that you could do that. And that's something I value highly in myself. Is if there's ever a thing where I feel staunchly about it, I want to pick it apart, and I want other people to pick it apart. That was one of the biggest parts of starting this podcast. I want to have people on from the other side, right? Like I would love to have somebody from both of these perspectives on, right? Like that drill guy that thinks climate change is totally made up. And I know a lot of these people, I'm sure they will be on. I probably had some on in the past. I could probably name some names right now, but I won't. And then I want to have the other one. I want to have these people that think, energy needs to die. It's a dead industry, right? We've heard that a million times, like energy's dead. It's one of the most ridiculous things, but I want to have those people on. I want them to explain to me exactly why you see that way. And maybe, like you say, because conversation is our biggest tool to combat the polarization. Let's talk about it. Let's see where we can land in the middle. Maybe I'll learn something. Maybe you'll learn something. Maybe we won't, right? Sometimes it's just people they're so in their ways they do not want to change. But that's all we can do. If you take you take your swing at it, right? Like your guys' letter. That's what I was so happy to see it is. It's another form of that, right? I have my podcast, you guys have your letter, we're both trying to make that change, but we're fighting the same battle, just in different mediums. And I just love to see that. It's just so few and far between, it feels like, but every day you see more. You find another podcast where people are talking nuance and have basic ideas. They're not just entrenched in one side or the other. And you're starting to see these TV stations that are, causing this problem. Their viewership is dropping, and people aren't wanting those polarized, spoon-fed.
That's good to hear. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like it's that echo chamber. It's going so that the only
preaching to the choir.
The only people listening to those real echo chambery shows and content are older and older and older, and the younger generations are seeing through it. And I think there's a real pushback to it. Just like that pendulum we talked about swings in the other way, I think there's going to be a real pushback against that, and we're going to start to see these nuanced ideas and more middle ground start to have another rise in the next couple of years. That's the way I see it. I mean, that may be a pretty optimistic view, but I'm an optimistic guy, and I like to think that that's the way things are going to go. And then we can really make some real change, and we can get some good policies and some environmental policies that do help and don't end up backfiring and hurting the cause they're trying to do. And we can investigate, is this group funded for good reasons? Do they actually care about the environment, or are they just trying to shut down industry for somebody else's good, right? That's the things we need to parse out, because I know there are people out there that are completely good of heart and they just want the best for the world. But there's also those people out there that aren't, and they're putting on that wolf in sheep's clothing. And we have to be able to, when you make it so that you can't even listen to the other side, now you can't parse those people out, and you just have to, they're saying the right things, we can't look into them. And that's what we need on both sides too. And those people that are pretending they care about the environment, they're in the industry, but really all they're out there is for money. And that's out there too. We can't pretend those guys aren't there too. So we have to be able to have conversations, like Skye said. That's where you separate the wheat from the chaff, and you find which ones are actually doing this for the right reasons. Are they actually bringing this forward? Are they actually trying to make progress, or are they just trying to, make their own money? It's usually on one side, it's money. On the other, it's social cookies, right? If can you say like I'm doing the right thing? And those are equally as bad. If you're doing just for money and letting the environment hurt, or if you're just trying to get your social equity points and you don't care if it's actually effective. If you I got my policy through, I get to sleep better at night, but it actually hurts your cause. Well, now you're not a real environmentalist to me if you don't care the actual outcomes of what you're trying to do, as long as it looks like you're making change, right? And that's conversation's the only antidote to it. I don't see how we can expand that conversation faster. And like I said, I'm optimistic that it is happening. I'm just an impatient guy and I want it to happen now.
Like, I think I saw it happening because like before, I don't know, just stuff's changing so fast and it's kind of scary. But there's always like that one picture of like an oil well and it's like, don't drill, this is bad, they're lying to you, or like the other side where it's just like we need to save flowers and like have a picture of a green field, like we need to save our only earth. And then I saw a picture not too long ago that there was just, I forget the title, but the figure in my mind was just windmills, like wind turbines, solar panels, and then an oil derrick. And that image was kind of repeated, that it was a mixture of both oil derricks and renewables, but it wasn't, it was all green, like the color of it was green in different shades of it, but it wasn't like the oil derrick was like red and like flaming and like killing everything. it was just a really calming picture to see. It was like, okay, good, other people are seeing that there needs to be everything. It's not renewables versus oil and gas right now. Just on the last post, it was okay, we need all of this to work together. So I think you're right that like you want it to happen now. I think it's happening now, and I hope it's happening now, and I hope it's happening faster, because we want to be I want to be proud of Canadian resources and Canadian energy, and I want to work in Canada. But if we're not proud of Canadian resources and Canadian energy, I'm going to move and work in Norway or like somewhere that I can pursue my passion and do what I love. And so that's, I think, another way to flip the switch is have people just trying to show more pride in their energy industry, and like understanding that bringing in renewables is just another market that we can start capitalizing on.
And like there's and like the government recently announced, I've actually been following this company since they started up, the geothermal company. And it's technology that is used within the oil and gas industry. And so it was a bunch of them that have experienced engineers, geos that have worked in there, and then they created this geothermal company. And like even invite you to like check it out on their website, and it's actually pretty neat. Like honestly, like I was kind of like mind blown at like some of the things that they were doing, but it's just different game changing ideas and innovation that's born here in Canada, and like right here in Alberta. And so it's actually pretty neat.
And just for people that don't know, so geothermal energy is using the heat from the Earth's core and just Earth's natural geothermal energy, and start trying to harness that in certain ways, just like we do in the ocean, trying to use like ocean turbines with the currents of the ocean to run energy. It's a very similar thing, but just using the actual Earth's heat, right? That's what that is.
Yeah, so it's about pumping cold water from the surface
down
into the earth, just based on the geothermal gradient,
right?
And then just you don't get to the core. That'd be sweet. You go down far enough that it can actually start heating up that fluid. Maybe they're looking into solvents now. I have no idea. Actually, there was another technology here in Canada again that they're calling it the Everloop, and they're kind of having, I think it's a legitimate loop that they have for geothermal energy, that it's a closed system and they're just moving the same fluid consistently. And so that was another cool thing to read. And then just just using the natural gradient of the earth. But then you have to look at that too, that some places can't use that because of the geology underneath.
Right.
And one, it would be too hard to drill. Two, the geothermal gradient isn't there, so you don't have the heat to actually heat up the fluid that you're trying to make energy from. And
which is no different than some countries having different solar patterns that allow for different solar energy, the different wind patterns that have a different wind.
yeah,
Right? You need to use the right solutions for the right places. You just need to keep innovating and bringing more technology, so we have more tools in our toolkit to bring it right. We need hydro in the more historic sense, but then the new kind of hydro, like using the ocean currents, that's a super cool idea to me, right? And then putting wind turbines out in the water with those all the winds coming off the coast, right? Like there's so many ways that in the last 20 years, it seems like we're so willing to look for the bad in everything that we're always focusing on it, and we never focus on any of the good and any of these amazing technologies over the last 20 years, the last 40 years. What we've changed and these ideas we've come up with and the things we've implemented are just mind-blowing, like you say. And it's almost sad to see, but like I said, I'm pretty confident that we're on the right track, and that these type of things are going to start becoming more mainstream, and people are going to do their own research. They're not just going to depend on their echo chamber to bring their information for them. And that's what's really going to push forward the movement to actually have real policy start to push these things forward. Because for a while, it seems like policy's been fighting the actual change, right? So,
and allow for integration. I want Canada to be that forefront, because that would just be amazing. We would have everything. We'd have responsible development of and the other thing I was excited about is hearing that Alberta was looking into more mining and actually utilizing the mineral resources here in Canada. And that was exciting too. It was like, perfect. Like, we'll have mining, we'll have hydrocarbons, we'll have hydro, we'll have hydrogen, we'll have every single market. We'll be leaders of it. I want to be leaders of it. And it's just, I want to get excited about these new technologies, and I already am. But
Go ahead, Skye.
Oh, well, it just came to my mind, just like you're talking about that. Like, even with all these like pre-existing wells, or like the well water from wells that are producing, there's high contents of your heavy minerals within the water, like lithium. And so companies are developing the technologies to extract lithium from your brine waters. And that's going to be needed for all the electric vehicles and batteries that we're going to be needing. And so it's pretty cool, like just like being in the whole geology side of things, and like natural resources. Like, there's just so much that we have to offer here, not just Alberta, but like Canada alone, like all across the board. And so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really, really cool to see the innovation that Canada's at the forefront of. And I imagine, being geologists, it's probably even cooler because you get to understand it on a deeper level, right? Like when I was going through school and they're telling me, and just using that tailing pond example, that there was heavy metals, they just kind of used the gold and platinum because that's really easy for the dum-dums like us to understand. But then when because there's so many actual minerals and things that, if you understand it, there's so much more out there, and Canada is so rich in terms of what we have beneath it. We're such an amazing country. We just don't know how to fully utilize it yet. But the more we can stay on that forefront and stay ahead of the curve, making sure we're keeping that, we just need to support that. And all the things we talked about over the last 2 hours is exactly that process itself of how do we stay on that forefront? How do we make sure that we are not just falling to the wayside and letting other countries pick up our slack and maybe do things not as well as we could, because we have shown an amazing track record, probably one of the best track records. Like I say, maybe a couple Nordic countries might want to have a few words over that. But I'm personally proud. It might just be my love of Canada that biases me that way, but I think we do things the right way, and the more we can keep on that path, the better. Was there any other technologies or procedures or anything that you guys wanted to cover? Anything that we missed? I got a couple kind of wrap up questions, but I just want to make sure before we get to those that we didn't miss covering anything.
Well, just like about like just an example of policy, just changing policy. Just learned about this. This was actually pretty interesting. Like with our offshore. So, for example, to drill an offshore well, it costs $100 million to draw a single offshore well on the East Coast.
Wow.
Versus you drill here in the Canadian Sedimentary Basin, here in Alberta, Saskatchewan, northeastern British Columbia. It varies across the board because of depth, if you're doing a horizontal lateral, but they can be $1 million, and then upwards to $8 million, depending on what type of wells you're drilling.
Right.
And so it's a huge contrasting difference. And so with the policies on the East Coast, it used to take 900 days to approve one well to get drilled on the East Coast. And comparing it to Norway, it takes 78 days to approve a well. And I just heard this stat, so it's so approximate. So they drilled about 50 wells this year in Norway. And over the last 30 years, we've drilled about 50 wells over the last 30. Wow. And so it's a huge contrasting difference between the different policies. And just recently heard they changed, they revised that policy, which took 900 days to drill a well, and they revised it to be about 90 days on the East Coast. And so it's like stuff like that, because like as an investor, if you want to, to produce and, like accelerate, like, meet the demands that are out there, 900 days versus 78 days, which one's more attractive to go for? So it's awesome that there's groups that were advocating for these processes to get changed. We can still have those same environmental standards. We can still exceed those environmental standards, but we can do it in a fashion that we can do it quicker and still maintain our ESG initiatives or our ESG goals. And so that's something that's positive. And so it's like with these different policies, it's just like, hey, if they're not working, maybe it's time to take a look at them and just see what needs to be changed to drive more incentives to be able to produce from here in Canada.
Yeah, and have Canada more of an advantage within industry that we could utilize, and then attract investors here to continue.
Exactly, because even at the very least, when you say something like that, like you look at Canada and we have this huge, I think misleading viewpoint around the world of what we are. You have Leonardo DiCaprio coming up and talking
the
all
Chinook.
that. Yeah, well, that was kind of you see the way that the Canadian energy industry is viewed. When you look at Norway, they don't have any of that. They do a lot of the same things with a lot of the same policy, but they don't have the same stigma surrounding them. And I think that is one of the biggest tells of maybe there's some other externalities that are not being understood fully, and there's some forces at work that are not just for environmental use. There's other financial incentives that are painting that picture, and I think we need to really understand that and make sure that we're finding that balance, and that doesn't mean just, okay, well, there's people that are financially incentivized by having us laden down with environmental policy, even if it's not effective. And it's not about being effective, it's about, is it effective enough to get people to go elsewhere? And that's the big key. But the more we can educate people and bring them forward, because then if people are educated and they hear these smear campaigns, it doesn't affect them, right? When somebody says to me, I go, oh, well, that's not true. Oh, I see what they're doing there. They're calling it tar sand, right? If you actually understand what it is, right, you understand that they show these mines and, oh, look at what they're doing, but you say 95% of it's done through SAGD. Those type of things are helping arm yourself against these campaigns to make you at least educated, so you can make a good decision and know that if you should be seeing it that way, and will help build that pride in our energy resources and just in how Canada does anything. It doesn't even need to be put towards just energy, like you said, mining, anything. I believe that Canada can do any industry that can be done around the world if we have the resources to do it in Canada, right? I mean, we're not going to be maybe the biggest solar country if we don't have the right layout or whatever you need, the right facing, I don't know. But if it can be done here, we should be doing it here, because we have a track record that whatever it is, we do it right, and we do it with the right things in place and the right people, and we care about it. So the more we can bring here, so if we haven't missed anything else, maybe the last question I got for you guys is, if you guys had a magic wand right now and you can make any changes, whether that's to try and bridge the gap or create more conversations, or to maybe reverse any policies that you've been put in place, like what would you guys do if you had more stroke to kind of make a big change? If you had something to do, what would it be?
I think increase conversations and
Yeah.
just like, because it's going to be a slow road.
Mhm.
And we've kind of noticed that when we wrote this letter, we didn't think it would get anywhere. But
Right.
now that it got out to you and we're on this podcast, it is building momentum, and we're building momentum just within other areas and meeting with people. We actually meet with people on the East Coast over Zoom now and talk
Nice.
about this too. And like,
Yeah.
I think if I had a magic wand, I think just have everyone just have those conversations and be like what Skye said, be willing to listen.
Mhm.
And then like what you said with the Turing test, like being able to view the other argument. So, and yeah, I think it would just be listening and being willing to understand the other
Mhm.
viewpoint of the argument, and to see that we can have all these different industries here in Canada to
Yeah.
help support Canada, and that we can do it here and not somewhere else.
Mhm. Bring everybody to the table pretty much is what we're trying to
Yeah.
do. Yeah, and in my head, the easiest way to do that is get people. The more we can get people to put less stock in social media and more stock in the actual conversations they have with real people, less stock in what they see on screens and stuff, and actually discuss with people, talk to people in the industry. Don't just go off of what you saw on the news, or somebody shared this smear campaign, on an Instagram story. You have to actually do some research and look into it and take less stock in that, because everybody has their own their own reasons and their own incentives behind what they're sharing on that, and usually a lot of it is just disingenuous. I'd say upwards of 90% of what's on social media is pretty disingenuous. This thing aside,
Yeah.
everybody's what they're posting of their lives and stuff. We understand that social media is disingenuous by nature, but intellectually we can't force ourselves
Detach that.
yeah, we can't detach from that. We don't understand that, but the more you can try and be conscious in what you're doing, I think that will bring people swinging towards more conversations. Like you say, bring more people to the table when they're not just getting their information. Oh, I'm educated on that because I saw an Instagram post on it. I know where my position is on that, and that's not a position. What you saw on social media is not a position. Maybe that's the most important thing, just to bring people. Listen to a podcast, look up some YouTube
Yeah.
videos, watch some things, get some education, right? So no,
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to do that. And on your side, Skye, what would maybe your thing if you had a magic wand? What would your big change be?
If I was to wave my magic wand, I'd probably be more is just bringing that balanced conversation to the
Yeah,
mix.
yeah,
Having that energy literacy,
mhm,
that I would say, just having, just promoting that critical thinking, encouraging people to, reach out and learn something new,
yeah,
that they're not familiar with, and to kind of branch out from where they're standing at. And that would be my biggest thing, is because
yeah,
there's, with this polarization, it's, there's a lack of knowledge, there's a lot of emotions,
mhm,
around, these topics, and just having, knowledge, like even within like schools, like I've heard from, other people that I know, where their kids come home from school and they're like, daddy, like, why are you destroying the earth,
yeah,
like, and like that. And it's, and that's something that, like, everyone has a right to their views, but it's just, I think the best thing is just to promote critical thinking. Just, all right, I read this, what is it saying, like, what is this source? And I think that's just the biggest thing. I think it's pretty cool learning about all these new non-renewables, and like these new innovations within the oil and gas industry that are coming
yeah,
out. And like these companies, and like I would want people to know is that these companies, they see a problem, and they're working, they're researching, they're trying to find solutions to them.
mhm,
And like I would encourage like people like who are trying to figure out where they want to go, or like where their passion is. Like I like the STM sciences, getting into the sciences, if you want to help and be part of the solution, go into the sciences and try to come up with problems or come up with solutions to problems. and like that's the only way we're gonna progress is if you have an idea, don't hide it under something, even though but it could lead to something. And so it's that's what I would say is just increasing our energy literacy and just being open to new ideas.
Yeah.
So,
and I think you guys are both right on the right path with that. I think a lot of people would say, well, I'd wave my wand and I'd take all the emissions out of the world or something like that. But if you don't change the causes and educate people, the same things are going to start rearing their head, right? The same type of backwards policy that ends up actually hurting things because of lack of understanding is going to just keep coming up. It might not be in this industry, might be in another one, but like you said, critical thinking is the only ammunition you have against just being towed along your whole life and not making any decisions for yourself. It's that critical thinking. You have to take everything with a grain of salt and from both sides and really find your middle ground, do your own research. And I think that's very important. And I think you're very right about that too, is I think maybe one thing that if other than that I would change is maybe if we could change our education system too, to maybe balance that out and bring more positive light and have people be more proud of those innovations of what we're doing. Because you take a student that is in Alberta and the schooling that they get, and it's biased to the one side. And then I just had a friend, he was in high school and he went to, or a family friend, and he went to BC for his last 2 years of high school and went through the schooling there. And the way he would talk about it, he just said, like, they're just all of our social classes are just ragging on the oil sands in Alberta and dragging it through the mud. And that's just a really unhealthy way to bring people up, because it locks people off from doing their own research and being more well-rounded and having faith in your country and being proud of your country. I think that goes a long way and is a really big piece of the strength. Everybody looks to GDP to show what the strength of a country is, but I think even more so important than that is what the residents of that country believe in and what they think of their country. And I think that is a huge piece of this that we need to make sure we're valuing, so that we're not just having people write it off right off the bat because that's what they were educated in. They're told from the time they're 6 years old that it's a bad thing. We need to have that middle ground, unbiased education to bring people up and at least give them a chance, because a lot of times it takes till you're 20 some years old and you first do your own research, and man, a lot of the things I were told wrong, and I had that process a lot of times. When I went to school, I realized that. And then when I graduated school and I started listening to podcasts, man, even the stuff I was learning in university, once I'd hear some experts on a Joe Rogan on sleep, and I go, oh, I looked into sleep. I was never told that sleep has that much of a direct correlation to all-cause mortality or, breath work. And then you read a book like this, Breath by James Nestor, and it changed your whole outlook on something so basic as breathing. But we're just being educated in these easy ways, whatever's easiest just to get out to the population, even if it's not the right information, it's what's easy. And I think that's where the only antidote to that is, like you say, conversation and critical thinking. So I'm really glad to hear that's what you guys are on the same page of. And just to finish it out one more time, I know we already said it, but where can people go to find your guys' letter, give it a read? I'll link it when I release the podcast, but just in case they're listening to this at their computer, at their work, and they just want to give the letter a read, see if they want to sign, and where can they find all that stuff?
So you can find it on the website called Students for Canada.
Students for Canada, right.
And there's also projects too that, like, we did write this for a volunteer group called Students for Canada. Mm-hmm. And if you go there, you can scroll down and it says student letter to PM Trudeau.
Okay.
And then when you click that, there's also more projects that Canadians talk to Canadians. That's another project that the Students for Canada are working on, divestment discussions. And right around there, you see read the letter or click to sign. Okay. So you can find it on Students for Canada, and please give it a read. And
and just pass this along to your network. Like, if you know of students that are going to university or not even in university, like if they're in high school, or pass this along to them. And and it's just something that really has pulled both sides of the discussion together with this letter. And Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And anything else that you think people should be looking towards? Like I said, I'll link to all that. Oh, another question I have is, do you guys have a plan for when you are going to send it? Is there a certain amount of signatures you guys are trying to get to a goal of before you send it, or is there anything like that? Like, will people be aware of when it does get sent to be able to follow up on it, and let me know when you do in whatever podcast and release? I'll add it in the intro, let people know that you guys had sent it and all that.
So that's kind of funny because we did send it kind of a while back. When did we send it?
I'd say September.
Okay, so
like beginning of September.
I got you. You're just gathering more.
We're gathering more, and then because we wanted to make sure we got it out relatively quick, and then we wanted to get a response from members of parliament to
Has there been any response?
We do have one, which is great.
Cool.
And I'm not sure. I think we talked about in the last one, but we might be trying to keep it on the down low right now. But so like we first mailed out a 55-page document with 2,818 signatures.
Wow.
And physically mailed that because we're like, oh yeah, who can ignore a 55-page document?
Yeah.
And then we waited for a bit, didn't hear a response, and we're like, oh, COVID. No one's in the office, or there's going to be a backlog of mail and stuff. So then we figured out their actual emails and just online and searched it up, and then mailed it to, who did we mail it to? We mailed it to Justin Trudeau. We mailed it to Seamus O'Regan,
the Natural Resource Minister, and then we mailed it to Minister Wilkinson, so Environment and Climate Change, as well as Minister Freeland of Finance.
Cool. So out of one of those, we got a response, and we're in the process of actually having a conversation with them, and we're going to have it available for viewing.
Yeah.
That it's going to be Skye and I asking the individual questions.
Very cool.
Yeah, we're really excited. So they called us and they said, what do you want to get out of this conversation? And Skye and I just kind of stopped and we're like, we didn't think we'd get this far. And yeah, so it's actually gaining traction, and they were very proud of how we put our viewpoints in a letter. Mm-hmm. And they said they were proud of like the work that we were doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's gaining traction, and we're still trying to gain signatures because stuff's never static. You need to be dynamic, and
exactly. And like, to give your viewers like an idea of like people who've signed this letter, like we've had from the academics, researchers, and like specialists, like professors, we've had biologists, we've had bioresource techs, climate change scientists, and all the way to ecosystem monitoring and health economists, engineers, earth scientists, people in renewable energy, people within the oil and gas industry. And it's just like on both sides of the scale, it's like, and these people understand that's not just one, silver bullet. It's going to require all of the above
and integration
to move forward. Yes, integration. So
awesome. Well, thank you guys for coming on, and that's I'm glad to hear that they are proud of what you guys are doing, and I just want to say that I'm proud of what you're doing. Like I said, I think right at the start of the last one, when I read that letter, it was something like, man, this is the amount of times I sat around upset, and I wish I would have done something like this, but I just never had the cojones to type it up and do the research and make it happen. I was really proud to see that somebody is doing that, and just this is my little way of supporting that, because it's something that I've always felt really passionate about, and I was always looking for someone to take that first step. And that is good on you. It's not an easy thing to do to take that step, and I think that's really cool. The amount of traction it has gained, and don't give up. At the more signatures you get, let's get it to 10,000, then resend that sucker and see if you can get more responses. I think this is an important issue, and I think there's a real hunger for a nuanced perspective on things like this. I think people, there is a lot of literacy issues, but I think I don't think we give credit for the people that are a bit more of the silent majority that do feel the same way as us and want to see, but there's no representation for them. There is no middle ground, sort of speaking, ringing this bell, carrying this torch, and that could be you guys. And I think that's awesome. So the more I can support anybody listening right now, if any of this rang true with you, Students for Canada, I'll link this all in the podcast. And just one last time, thanks guys. That was really fun conversation. And if it goes any further, we'll have you back on and we can discuss it from then. And I'm excited to see what you guys do.
Oh, it was awesome. Thanks for having us, Nick.
No problem.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, there's another episode in the books. Episode 27 or 28. I don't know. Either one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I really enjoyed that conversation. And if anybody listens to that and either themselves would like to come on and add to it or rebut some of the points that we're making, maybe give another perspective that we missed, I would love to have more people on. This is one of those discussions where I'm just looking to learn more and would appreciate anybody's point of view on it. So either themselves or if they know somebody that they think would be a good fit to maybe round out some of these views a little bit better, send them my way. I'd love to take this discussion even further and really round it out nicely. So and one thing I forgot to put in the intro, at one point we just said a name of a certain person in government that isn't totally confirmed yet, and we just wanted to make sure, just in case things don't work how I want to, if you hear a little beep, that's just me bleeping out that name just to keep anonymity and all that kind of stuff. So that's what that was. And like I say every week, if you could pass this on to a friend, if it resonates with you, or give me a follow on my Instagram or Twitter pages for the VonDubCast. If you look that up, you'll see them right away. That'd be awesome. And thanks for sticking with me another week. And if you're new here, go check out some of the other episodes. I know this sounds kind of silly to pump my own tires, but I think there's a lot of good stuff and a lot of learnings to be had. So give them a try, and hopefully I'll see you here next week again. All right. Thanks, guys.